Recording in progress.
That was the best ever, okay? I gotta get everybody's attention. Okay, I'm gonna call the meeting to order, and I'm gonna apologize for our late start tonight. For those of you who have been waiting for us, our special meeting ran over. But with that, I'm gonna call this CCTA regular board meeting to order and ask that you give your attention to our short video.
This meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar to allow for public participation and comments. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority does not condone hate speech in any form. We continually strive to make life better for all members of our community and create an atmosphere where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak does so with civility, respect, and kindness for others. Public speakers will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The chair will call upon public speakers at the appropriate time. Each public speaker is requested to state their name and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Public speakers who wish to speak in person should submit a public speaker card to the clerk. Public speakers participating by Zoom who are wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice on the meeting agenda will be provided to the members. If authors of any written correspondence would like to speak during the meeting, they should raise their hand or submit a public speaker card. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you, Terry Ann. Can you take roll call for us, please?
Commissioner Armstrong?
Here.
Commissioner Arnrich?
Here.
Commissioner Benales?
Here.
Commissioner Burgess?
Here.
Commissioner Carlson?
Here.
Commissioner Kelly?
Here.
Commissioner Meadows?
Here.
Commissioner Obringer?
Here.
Commissioner Xavier?
Here.
Vice Chair / Representative Nowak?
Here.
Chair G?
Here.
Representative Anderson?
Here.
Representative Foley?
Present.
Representative Worth?
Here.
We have all members present.
Thank you very much. Our next item is Pledge of Allegiance, so please join me in. Okay, the next item on the agenda is public comment. So I know we did indeed receive some advance public comment letters, but this is an opportunity for anyone that's in the room here to speak during public comment, or if you are online, we will call on you as well. So Terry Ann, do we have any public comment speakers online?
We have received no public comment.
Okay. Do we have anyone in the room that wishes to speak during public comment as opposed to one of the agenda items? All right, seeing no one come forward and we have no one online, I'll go ahead and conclude and close public comment and move to the next item on our agenda, which is presentations. And the next item is actually our consent calendar. So I will turn to my colleagues and ask, are there any changes or comments from the authority board? Does anyone want to pull anything from the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, is there any members of the public that would like to comment on anything on the consent calendar? Do you see any, Terry Ann?
Halima, are you wanting to speak under public comment? I'm not sure. Okay. That was just to staff, so no public comment.
Okay. All right, so then do I have a motion for our consent calendar?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, So the motion was by Commissioner Arnridge, the second was by Commissioner Meadows. So Terry Ann, will you take our roll call, please?
Commissioner Armstrong,
Yes.
Commissioner Arnridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Banales,
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess,
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Meadows,
Yes.
Commissioner Obringer,
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier,
Aye.
Vice Chair Nowak,
Yes.
Chair G.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. All right, that takes us to our regular agenda items, and I know that we have quite a few tonight, so bear with us, but we're going to get started with the first one. There were no regular agenda items from the Administration and Projects Committee tonight. For the Planning Committee, our first item is approval to release the draft Contra Costa Countywide Transportation Plan. Staff is seeking approval to release it to all interested parties for public review and comment. And so Matt Kelly is our staff member to present.
Thank you, Chair G. Let me get this so it looks right on the screen. Here we go. Good afternoon, good evening now. Matt Kelly, Director of Planning here at CCTA. Good evening, authority members. I'm here with Jordan Brooks from Farron Piers, who assisted CCTA in development of the Countywide Transportation Plan, or CTP 2050. I'm going to turn it over to Jordan to begin the presentation and walk you through the last year and a half to 2 years of work that have really led to the development of a draft countywide transportation plan. As you may know, countywide transportation plan is called out as a requirement of Measure J. It's also one of the requirements as a congestion management agency here in California. So it serves double duty and really is the foundation and the vision document for what we do here at CCTA, and to really define the vision for the next 25 years. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jordan.
Thanks, Matt. Today we'll cover the CCTA Countywide Transportation Plan, or CTP 2050. We'll cover the CTP 2050 process and vision, our engagement with the community and stakeholders, the components of the plan, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A. So the CTP 2050 is the result of a robust multi-year planning process involving a needs assessment and 3 phases of community and stakeholder engagement that informed the final recommendations. The 2050 blueprint in phase 1, approved by the board in June 2025, laid out the framework for developing CTP 2050, including the approach to outreach and technical analysis. Since then, we've been developing the core components and recommendations of CTP 2050. The 2050 blueprint is the policy foundation of CTP 2050, establishing the vision, guiding principles, and strategies which respond to the regulatory and policy landscape, as well as key issues facing Contra Costa. The core recommendations of CTP 2050 include the transformative visions, project examples, and policies and programs that advance the vision. The business plan, documented separately, covers actions that CCTA will undertake to implement CTP 2050, including project delivery strategies, updates to business practices, and funding options. The CTP 2050 vision statement reads, Contra Costa residents, workers, businesses, and visitors will thrive through safe multimodal transportation systems that support a strong economy, equitable and accessible communities, and climate resilience. The 2050 blueprint defines 4 guiding principles aligned with the CTP 2050 vision, which is safe travel, access for all, livable and connected neighborhoods, and growing sustainably. The principles are interrelated and together represent a holistic approach to transportation and quality of life in Contra Costa. Next, I'll move into a summary of how we partnered with communities and stakeholders throughout the process. Across 3 phases of engagement, the project team used a variety of methods to reach community groups, advocates, and stakeholders in all 4 geographic areas of the country. Phase one focused on, county, excuse me. Phase one focused on identifying needs and opportunities and developing the policy foundation for the 2050 blueprint. Phase two sought input on the proposed transformative visions, which are a set of approaches for improving transportation across the county. And then phase three gathered feedback on the proposed CTP safety and climate adaptation and resilience policies. This slide summarizes all phases of CTP 2050 engagement, including over 5,000 responses across two public surveys, 15 pop-up events and ad impressions, focus groups, community-based organization partners, and stakeholder discussions, including with the CCTA board and committees. Two population-weighted digital surveys in English, Spanish, and Chinese ensured that CTP 2050 reflected input from all demographic and geographic groups across Contra Costa. The surveys, as well as general information about CTP 2050, were promoted through a variety of channels, including at in-person pop-up events and social media, including through Facebook, Instagram, and Spotify. Partnerships with CBOs were also fundamental, as CBOs not only provided valuable feedback based on the historically underrepresented and underserved communities they represent, but also helped to distribute information about CTP 2050 to their constituents. Throughout the CTP 2050 planning process, internal and external stakeholders, including RTPCs, CCTA advisory committees, CCTA board members, transit agencies, and cities, were asked to provide input and review key elements of the draft plan. The project team held 3 two-day workshops with authority board members to establish goals, priorities, and strategies for CTP 2050. CCTA engaged with each of Contra Costa's 4 RTPCs, presenting at 8 RTPC board and technical advisory committee meetings. CCTA convened a CTP task force comprised of planning staff from local jurisdictions to offer ongoing input throughout the CTP 2050 process. And CTP also presented at meetings of the agency's Citizens Advisory Committee, Technical Coordinating Committee, CTP Ad Hoc Committee, and Planning Committee. The last section here is on the key components and recommendations included in CTP 2050. The core recommendations of CTP 2050 include the transformative visions, the policies, recommended updates to the growth management program, and projects and programs. The transformative visions are a set of conceptual projects, programs, and policies that were identified through review of the guiding principles and strategies from the 2050 blueprint. Together, they provide a coordinated and comprehensive framework for implementing the CTP 2050 vision. We presented the drafts of these to you during a previous phase of engagement and have landed on these 3 transformative visions and their components. So we have a create people first streets, a build complete reliable transit network, and provide reliable freeway travel as our transformative visions. CTP 2050 also identifies 5-star projects, which are high-quality projects that embody and implement the transformative visions and 2050 blueprint. 5-star projects were identified through a review process focused on strong alignment with one or more elements of the CTP vision, documented community support, demonstrated effectiveness, and meaningful transportation system or mobility benefits. These 4 example projects provide tangible, place-based illustrations of how the CTP 2050 vision can be implemented. CCTA is also developing 8 policies as part of CTP 2050. The policies establish new CCTA commitments and funding incentives for local jurisdictions to create a safer and more equitable, connected, and resilient Contra Costa transportation system. The policies build on existing CCTA regional and state policies and guidance and support institutionalization of best practices. The 8 policies are the Livable Streets policy, which focuses on roadway design that considers safety, transit, placemaking, and more. The safety policy, the land use policy, the equity policy, a climate adaptation and resilience policy, a performance-based planning policy, a transit policy, and last but not least, a maintenance and network operations policy. And each of those policies has CCTA policy commitments. So here is a sample of some of those CCTA policy commitments that are included in CTP 2050. One is, at the top, you have for safety, establish incentives for jurisdictions to adopt policies that reduce exposure, severity, and likelihood of collisions. There's also align all investments with roadways design guidance and the Livable Streets Playbook. For equity, there's all programs will be need-based and focused on providing accessibility and mobility options for underserved users, including seniors, youth, and people with disabilities and communities. On the climate resilience, we have evaluate all investments for opportunities to address emergency evacuation and climate resilience. We have established a performance-based planning framework to guide investment and monitor effectiveness, and also support multimodal improvements in transit-serving areas. And with that, I want to hand it back to Matt to talk through the recommended updates to the growth management program.
Thanks, Jordan. So as part of CTP 2050, a set of recommendations were developed to the growth management program to ensure consistency with recent state land use and transportation legislation, as well as aligning with the Livable Streets policy to create safer, more complete streets. The GMP updates are planned to be implemented as part of the new TEP. These would not, be implemented right away as part of the CTP, but would be an implementation step that would take place as part of the TEP development, which is planned or tentatively planned to go to the ballot in 2028. So the four recommended updates include the updating transportation impact analysis requirements. And what this does is really clarifies the analysis that is done in local jurisdictions for development that is discretionary. So when the local jurisdictions do have discretion over approvals, that it's really spelled out what types of requirements are in those developments. It does not apply to ministerial or by right development projects. And that really goes to address the new state laws that streamline development and make it a little more difficult for local jurisdictions to weigh in on some of the details. Also add an item to the GMP compliance checklist to ensure that projects incorporate the Livable Streets policy, and that is done through development of objective design standards using the Livable Streets policy, and really that just ensures that jurisdictions and developers are going through a set of checklists that really provide a set of requirements for transportation facilities to be included in developments, and that all depends on the context of the surrounding streets and land use, and that's what the Livable Streets policy is all about. Now, to modernize the current Transportation Systems Management Program, that's kind of an old terminology. It's now known as TDM, Transportation Demand Management. That just shows we really have to modernize that policy and that program, and the model ordinance that we provide to local jurisdictions to really reflect current practices in parking reforms, multimodal priorities, and tying the types of mitigations that can come out of developments to our 511 CCTA programs. And finally, to implement guidance for traffic impact analysis and our sub-regional action plan development to really emphasize roadway safety, multimodal access, and complete streets over vehicle delay. So essentially accepting some level of delay in order to really support safety and multimodal access. So the way that this is implemented is through projects and programs. If you were over in the TEP meeting earlier, you heard about the 1,200 projects that have been collected as part of the CTP 2050. The CTP is a financially unconstrained document, so really, as Tim mentioned earlier, this is a laundry list of projects that have been submitted by local jurisdictions over the years. It reflects kind of the level of local need, and these were developed primarily through a 2023 call for projects, and then subsequently updated in 2025 when we did our 5-star projects call for projects. So the project list organizes the projects into 7 categories that you can see on the right, and you can see the kind of the spread of the number of projects throughout, but really complete streets and local roadway projects are really the majority of projects in the CTPL, is what we call the database of projects. So 75% of the $21.6 billion in capital costs is named projects, or what we call named projects. And we defined what we call named projects as projects over $10 million, projects that have a kind of a distinct location, a distinct impact, and have the cost of $10 million. These are projects that, you know, have a level of impact that we felt rose, you know, they rose above kind of the 1,000 or so projects that are smaller, you know, maybe a new bike path, a short section of bike path, short sidewalk segments, very, you know, small projects. So really, 15% of the projects are about 80% of the total cost. And those projects focus on transit freeways and those local roadway projects. In addition to the projects, CTP 2050 continues our investment in major programs. These programs really support folks who need assistance accessing those major capital projects. Really, the programs expand access, improve safety, and help tie the transportation system together and really work better for Contra Costa residents. These programs complement the major investments that I just mentioned, the capital projects, supporting folks with mobility needs, improve day-to-day system operations, and helping people make more efficient and sustainable travel choices. So you know about probably most of our major programs, youth and student transportation. That includes our school bus programs in La Miranda and San Ramon Valley, our reduced fare transit passes, safe routes to school programs, senior and paratransit programs, 511 CCTA, our development of mobility hubs around the county, and our smart signal traffic operations that is being deployed as we speak around the county. So before we get into Q&A, I just want to also mention that we do prepare a environmental impact report around the CTP. This is something we are not required to do, but because we established a precedence back in 1995 by preparing an EIR on our first countywide transportation plan, our legal advice has been to continue preparing EIRs on subsequent CTPs, and that decision was made by this board a couple of years ago to continue that process. So based on the project and program list that was presented tonight, and that list is, you know, can be found, there's a link from your packet to that full project list. We will be preparing the EIR based on that, and we will be issuing a notice of preparation. Thank you, Jordan. On Monday. They'll probably turn me around at the door if I don't know what it's called, but we will be filing that with the state, the county, and all of our normal stakeholders. and for public comment, and then the EIR will be prepared. That will come back to this body probably in about 6 months, early next year, and that will result in the final CTP. So at that meeting, we will adopt both the EIR and the final countywide transportation plan. That will also allow for the finalization of our 5 action plans for routes of regional significance, and those will go back to the RTPCs for their final adoption once the CTP adoption occurs early next year. So that is our presentation for tonight, and we can certainly take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Matt and Jordan. Before we dive into any questions or comments, a lot of us see this over and over and over, right? And we have an awful lot of MTC expertise up here. But for our broader audience tonight, can you give maybe just a couple sentences of why we do this, how it fits into the total region and MTC, and just a little bit of background other than, yeah. We don't want a dissertation, Matt. We just want a little bit of a...
Yeah, as I mentioned, it's required under Measure J and as a congestion management agency. And the reason that it's required amongst congestion management agencies is so that it does feed directly into the region and the RTP, Plan Bay Area 2050. So the way it is set up is that all the county transportation agencies are preparing their CTPs right now in preparation for Plan Bay Area 2060. So the goal is for the projects, programs, priorities within the CTP to feed directly into MTC's work that they've just initiated and will be occurring over the next couple of years. So there is a flow to things, and that they start hyper-local at the RTPCs with the action plan development, feed up into the CTP, and then make their way into the RTP. But also, in the case of CCTA, also feeds the TEP process. That was a very important component of the CTP, is making sure we were informing the TEP process and the policies and projects and programs that could be a part of that. So hopefully that.
Yes, thank
Maybe
you.
Chair G, do you mind if I just
Yeah.
add a few more things here? I think, so this CTP, I think, is actually very significant because the CCTA has been really operating under the same kind of set of projects and project lists for probably since 1997, pretty much. Like, we've been basically, for some of you not on the board, and I know Amy knows this, but there was a huge effort called Shape Our Future back in before 1997, and that's what really guided investment of projects in Contra Costa County, which then led to the 1997 CTP. And then we've been doing basically periodic updates to that every 4 years, and basically, and then that would feed into the RTP. And so this is really a significant CTP because we basically started from scratch. Like, we really needed, because we've delivered 97% of the projects in Contra Costa County, like, we really needed a brand new list of essentially an updated vision for the county for all transportation improvements in Contra Costa County. So the CTP, under the role of, CCTA is the designated countywide transportation planning agency, right? And so the CTP is really like our Bible that really sets the vision and sets the direction of, and really guides really all the investments, in Contra Costa County, and so it's not just related to Measure J investments, it's really related to all investments as we think about all the needs in Contra Costa County. And I think that's really important to kind of characterize this in terms of, a holistic vision, and it's really our roadmap. So as we think about the CTP, one of the things that I reluctantly will say is that we don't want this. The previous CTP would sometimes sit on a shelf, right? And I think this CTP was really meant to be actionable, and that was really part of this blueprint strategy that was developed. And so we really wanted to make sure that this is a document that helps guide decision-making, over the next 4 years, and continue to actually realize what's being developed in the countywide transportation plan in that vision. So this is a really important document, and I think releasing this to the public and to our stakeholders and local agencies for review, I think, is really important, so.
So I just want to add, this is fiscally unconstrained. The Plan Bay Area 2050 is fiscally constrained. So if you look at the two, you will not see as many projects flowing through into Plan Bay Area 2050 or 2060 going forward because of that fiscal constraint that MTC has to put on it. But we do go back to the different CTAs when it is fiscally constrained to determine which of the projects they want to make sure is in the Plan Bay Area document. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, we
Thank
go
you.
through a programming process to narrow down our list to a fiscally constrained list for MTC.
Thank you. I think that's a lot of helpful background, so I'll turn to my colleagues and ask if there's any questions or comments from the board. Yes, Commissioner Oberlinger.
Thank you. Yes, so I think this is the second time I've seen this, so I will be supporting this. I just did want to make sure I noted, so in our packet and the consent calendar, there were some projects, and I'm sure it's not just unique to Concord, but they're done, they were approved in the consent calendar, but yet they're listed in Appendix H. So I just want to encourage CCTA staff to reach out to the different cities just to make sure, because we might have more capacity, right, if we're including on Appendix H projects that we've already done. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions from the board? Yes, Juan.
Yes, through the chair, thank you. No worries. So I just had a question on timing of the draft EIR NOP. Is it helpful to wait until we get feedback on the draft CTP to then proceed with the EIR NOP? I just feel like this is the first time the public is seeing the draft of the whole document put together.
Right.
Maybe we should wait and get some feedback and then proceed with I just don't want the train to leave the station and then it's harder to make changes once we're knee-deep in an EIR process.
Yeah, I mean, we were going to do them concurrently, but that is a fair point. You know, our environmental consultants recommended releasing the NOP after tonight's meeting and kind of putting them out there concurrently, but, you know, I think we could approach it the way you recommended, where, you know, the draft was out first before the NOP. I think we're open to that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll leave it to the board. I just feel like it might be beneficial for the process to allow some feedback back before we proceed with the EIR.
Any other comments, questions? Yes, Commissioner Arnridge.
Well, thanks for the presentation. I'm going to go backwards on the last comment. I think we ought to do it at the same time. The reason why is the timing. It takes so long to do these plans. And this, again, is a giant wish list from our side. MTC will cut it back. They have to. That's their responsibility. If we had all the time in the world, you know, I've seen plans that say 2020 and you're working on it till 2020, so it's pretty useless plans. So I think in this case, given where we are, that we need to do them simultaneously. And through the process, it will evolve and change if some fall out. And it's not, they probably won't fall out from our side. And what we're testing is what is in ours. So as we go forward, it'll likely probably be a few added. So in terms of scoping for an EIR, then that would have to be looked at. But because they take so long to do and to meet MTC's requirements to get them, and all the other agencies like us are doing it, I think it's important for us to feed them out there, get the public input. I think what's exciting about this opportunity, as our executive director said, because we've accomplished so much, but we still had a big wish list that couldn't be, it wasn't in Measure J, that I think this is what helps inform us. It helps to create a transportation expenditure plan. And the reality is you can't, if you keep waiting, it's like not having a schedule, you never accomplish anything. So I think we have to get this done and get it there, and they will adjust themselves as they move forward. But I want to be really clear. High-level view, we have to do this. It's in Measure J. It's an accountability factor. We need to do this. Two, we need to inform our constituents, what have we done, where are we headed? And it has to feed into MTC because that's the mothership, right? they're there, well, not just because Sue's the head of it, but it is the entity that controls and tries to coordinate for all these independent agencies. So in a simplistic, simple way, this is a really important step. We need to get it done, and or we will talk about this forever. And we'll keep planning, and we'll keep doing it, and we'll keep doing it. You know, there's a point in time, and you draw a line. All EIRs we do in our own cities, there's a point in time you say, okay, this is the point in time we need to move forward. So I think we will accomplish everything we need to and be as transparent as possible with the public.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Yes, Commissioner Meadows.
So I'm looking at slide 18, recommended updates to the growth management program, on the last one with the little cone. The last three words, over vehicle delay. So is vehicle delay okay? I mean, because I kind of think we need to move people.
I mean, the statement here is that some delay may be sacrificing some delay for the benefits of safety and multimodal access. We're not saying it's okay, but we're saying those other things are more important in terms of the trade-offs. The state, however, does say that delay is not important. They did that through SB 743. However, that's a subjective, I think, idea that, this room may or may not agree with, but that is the kind of environment that we're living in. But what we're trying to say here is that that it may be an acceptable trade-off.
In my opinion, I mean, you start creating too much delay, and you get pissed off drivers, and then that causes other issues too. That's not safe. So, I think we need to move people.
I think primarily the big thing on that is really updating it reflective of new state guidelines. I mean, that's really what that's all about, because state guidelines are more focused on VMT than level of service, and so I think that's primarily what that's focused on.
Okay. Other questions, comments from the board? All right, I'm not seeing any, so Terry Ann, do we have any online public comment?
We have received no public comment, written or verbal.
Okay, is there anyone in the room that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing no one coming forward, I will close public comment on this item and ask if I have a motion to approve the release per agenda item 9A.
I so move.
Second.
Okay,
Weren't we discussing putting these together with the EIR? What happened to that discussion?
To move it as presented.
Yeah, I assume your motion was to move it as per
yes,
The
I
staff.
was moving as presented by staff.
Okay, which is, if I understood Matt correctly,
They're both at the same
is to
time.
do it concurrently.
Correct.
And can I just make a comment? So I appreciate that this is schedule driven. I guess my only comment would be, to Newell's point about potential changes as we're going through this and tweaks, right? So as long as we understand that there may be potential changes or tweaks, I think I'm good with that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for accepting the motion.
Okay, so the motion by Commissioner Obringer and the second, was there a second yet?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, Commissioner Arnrich, okay. So can you take a roll for us, Terry Ann?
Commissioner Armstrong?
Yes.
Commissioner Arnrich?
Yes.
Commissioner Banales?
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess?
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly?
Yes.
Commissioner Meadows?
Yes.
Commissioner Obringer?
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier?
Aye.
Vice Chair Noack?
Yes?
Chair G?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to agenda item 9B, which is the City of Richmond audit and the partial release of withheld Measure J funds for the countywide transportation services for seniors and people with disabilities. And my script says Halima will be presenting this, but I don't see her.
Halima's going to be presenting online tonight.
Online, okay, there she is. I'm sorry, Halima. The last place I looked for you was online. Nice to see you. So please go ahead.
She's in the
Yes, good evening, board members. Apologies for not being there in person. I am calling in from DC, where I've been attending the Smart Grant Summit. And I believe there are staff from the city of Richmond, Gabino and LaShonda, if you want to wave your hand so that folks can acknowledge you. Thank you for being here. And also Wayne, who's joining online. So very much excited to share this with you all. Some of you may have been on the board when this audit took place. And so you may have some of that context, but for those of you who don't, I will kind of walk through that history. And so the City of Richmond operates Our Transit, which is their city-based paratransit program. It is a door-to-door service, and they also provide a subsidized Lyft program for people who are 55 and older, and also for adults with disabilities between the ages of 18 and 54. And it not only serves Richmond, but it also provides service to North Richmond, Kensington, and El Sobrante. And the city receives Measure J, Program 15, and 20B funds from CCTA to operate these services. And in the last couple of fiscal years, starting in FY 2017, there were some patterns of late, incomplete, or claim forms that had some errors in them, and that went on for the next few fiscal years, which triggered some escalating concerns and ultimately resulted in withheld funds and eventually a formal audit. This was something that our then Paratransit Coordinating Council, now Accessibility Advisory Committee, also was involved in and weighed in on. And so this issue spans 5 fiscal years. And then in 2024, we worked with Advanced Mobility Group, or AMG, to conduct an audit, and that provided a 1-year performance improvement plan between January through December of 2025. And so we've been working with the city to identify some of the changes they can make to improve their service and bring them up to speed and really provide the support on the recommendations. And so that kind of leads me into the performance improvement plan and sharing a little bit about the context of this. This is the first time that CCTA has done a performance improvement plan and withheld funds for Measure J, Program 15, and 20B. And this was designed not to be a punitive measure, but really to be a structured and supportive framework so that the city has a clear roadmap for improvements and the tools that they need to strengthen their program and make sure that the community feels confident in that service, and also to make sure that we are making sure there's accountability in how public funds are being used, and that the service quality is being maintained. And so throughout this, we learned a lot of lessons on CCTA's oversight framework and how we can provide clearer performance standards, stronger requirements in our claims process to catch some of these things earlier on if it were to happen again, and just being more proactive with how we monitor our claims form process for Measure J, Program 15. And so the audit provided a number of areas where improvement was needed, and that was put into 35 conditions in this performance improvement plan, which included client and ridership growth, looking at an increase there, client satisfaction and feedback, service reliability, budget and cost efficiency, especially cost per trip, program oversight and training for the staff who manage this program on the ground, and then vehicle upgrades and maintenance. And so among these categories, there were a total of 35 conditions, out of which 32 were met. The ones that were not met were discussed with the City of Richmond. We had a meeting earlier in the year in January to discuss the reports they had been submitting throughout this performance improvement plan period, to go over their progress and to understand where some of the metrics fell short and why. And based on that, we have 2 items that are pending that we are waiting to formally close this out. Those items are the driver certification to operate new vans. And so the City of Richmond has had older vans that they were looking to replace to have more modern systems. And those vans have a higher number of passenger seats, which requires an additional certification from the DMV. So that has been a barrier, and it's something that the city is actively working towards. And the second deliverable that we are working on closing out is to receive a cost benefit analysis on transitioning paratransit service delivery to a contracted vendor. That's something that can happen very soon and fairly quickly. But those are the 2 items that we are waiting to close out this performance improvement plan. Beyond that, I will say the city did an excellent job of really pushing through with limited resources and being able to turn the service around. It is a service that's very valued by community members, and I myself myself went and did a site visit in February to get a sense of the service. I got to go on a ride along with the driver and actually see how the customers felt about the service, as well as check out the vehicles that are waiting to be put into service. And so with that being said, we are recommending a release of 75% of the funds. And this is something that went through both the WICTAC board and also the Accessibility Advisory Committee that have recommended this as well to move forward. This 75% release amount that you see here doesn't have the full cost because we deducted the cost of the audit from this withheld amount. So we deducted $13,160, which was the remaining cost that was with that we had spent for the audit and working with AMG. And so with that, the remaining amount that we are recommending for release is $2,709,706.20. And we are recommending to continue to hold the remaining 25% until the two outstanding items are complete. And we can release those amounts anytime within the year or at the next cycle when we have our Measure J claim process come up again for the next fiscal year. And so I know I went through this fairly quickly, but I know that there's a lot on the agenda and I want to make sure that I keep it brief, but I'm happy to share more information, give more context, or answer any questions before the board makes a decision.
Thank you very much, Halima, and thank you for being with us, given your time zone. And I want to thank the City of Richmond staff for joining us, too. So I'll turn to my colleagues and see if there's questions, comments. Yes, Commissioner Kelly.
Halima, thank you. This is Chris Kelly, and I'm glad to see the City of Richmond has made progress here. Regarding the transitioning the paratransit service to a contracted vendor, have you and the City of Richmond identified one or more vendors, contracted vendors, that would be suitable?
Not at this time.
Okay, but you're going to be
perhaps maybe the city staff want to chime in, they can.
Okay, but in other words, they're going to be looking at, and I see somebody moving here, so maybe they are going
LaShonda and Gabino are there, and I appreciate all the work they've been putting in.
maybe they will just answer my question. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is LaShonda White, Deputy City Manager for Community Services, and
good afternoon, buenas noches. My name is Gavino Redondo as a project manager in the Public Works Department.
so we're first just say we're happy to be here. Thank you so much to CCTA staff, Halima, also to WICTAC staff, been extremely supportive through this process. So to answer your question, we have drafted a document that will lead us through what the process would look like if we were considering to transition the program to a consultant, but because we're a government entity and we have our paratransit services are provided mainly by City of Richmond staff, it would be a process where we'd have to meet and confer, and it's an entire process, have to go to council, but we have not begun to think about which entity could take over the service if that's the route we wanted to go. We still have a few steps to
Okay, but you're in the process of considering this.
We're having a conversation about it as part of the performance improvement plan, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Nowak.
I just wanted to thank you guys for all the work you've done. I was on the commission when this all started, and I'm really glad to see 32 out of 35. That's tremendous progress. And 2 left don't seem to be insurmountable, so I look forward to seeing you come back with the remaining 25%. And thank you for all your hard work on this.
Commissioner Xavier.
I'm happy to see that something's happening. I was on the Paratransit Coordinating Council way back then in 2017 when the funds were withheld. So I'm happy to see that the City of Richmond has solved most of the problems and is providing transportation for the seniors. I think the seniors are happy also. Thank you.
Commissioner Arnrich.
Yeah, Halima, thank you. I think it was before your time when this started. As I recall, when we looked at this, it was less than 5 people that were served the first year, and it was over $1.5 million. what I don't see in your using percentages, and we get sideways in transit and things, we say, oh, they've increased ridership by X percentage. How many people for the, what will be effectively how many millions of dollars, how many people have we helped? And what's that? I mean, yeah, we met all the metrics, but bottom line is, you know, we got into this because, you know, we were spending $250,000 a person to take a ride. And there was some staggering number like that. So what's the real truth? How many people rode this? And what is that costing per trip now? And is this the right solution? Because there are great transit agencies from AC Transit and others. We could go to them and make a cost proposal and pay them per trip or whatever is, you know, a good solution. So where are we at?
Yeah, so one of the metrics that we were looking at was a decrease in cost per trip. And we did set a deliverable to bring that to $200 for cost per trip or lower. The city is getting close. Again, I think labor is one of the big costs that has continued to kind of be a little bit shaky there. And so I think with this cost analysis, that's one way to consider another alternative. And yes, when it comes to the number of riders, it was a low number relative to the number of registered users. And so we have one of the recommendations and the metrics was 10% increase in registered client growth, and then also an increase in the number of people that are actually using the service.
How many people? All I'm after, how many people? 'Cause you're
Yeah,
doing
I
the
will
same
let the
thing.
city speak
I
to
want-
the current numbers.
wait a minute, that's what started this. We should have those numbers ourselves. Well,
We
no,
do
no.
have the
I know,
numbers.
that's Richmond, that's Richmond. We, as the agency who was funding this, we started this whole analysis because we found out how few people it was. So do we know as an agency, or are we relying upon them to tell us? Because our audit.
We do have the numbers. We were getting monthly and quarterly reports from the city. So as of the last report that I received in December of 2025, there were 597 registered clients in the city of Richmond and 87 registered clients in unincorporated areas. So the total registered client number was 684. And then when it comes to clients that actually use the service, that number is 26 for the number of people that use the service. And for client boardings, we had 122 boardings, and that's on the city side. There's also a contract with Transmetro that had 71 client boardings.
Thank you.
And we also have an additional program, which is the Lyft component, which has grown significantly. So increase in ridership of the hours from paratransit has also increased for the serving population.
Okay. Other comments, questions from the board? Yes, Commissioner Armstrong?
Yeah, just a comment. When we heard this at the planning committee, I was particularly impressed by the cooperative nature of Richmond to make improvements towards the PIP, and also by their testimony when they were talking about steps they'd taken towards getting the new certification for their drivers. And I think what was also important to me was the comment that was made that Accessibility Advisory Committee, as well as WICTEC, was recommending to move forward with the 75% release.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the board? All right, seeing none, I'll turn to whether we have additional public comment. Terry Ann, do we have any online?
Yeah, we have two public comments. We can take the one online first. That is Wayne Tonda.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Wayne Tonda. I've had the pleasure of working with the city of Richmond in the recent past regarding the issue that you're discussing tonight. And I just wanted to respond to the question that was earlier asked by a board member, and that was how many people are actually using the service in Richmond. We have about 600 individuals who have signed up. Some of them ride our van service. Many others choose to ride our Lyft service, or in other words, ride hailing. Of the about 600 clients that have signed up, about 100 during the year, different individuals used our van program, and about 400 used our Lyft program. Both of them funded out of Measure J, one out of 15, Program 15, the other out of Program 20B. Together, they seem to work well. Our clients self-select which one to use. The Lyft program, of course, is much lower in cost. In fact, I think it's the lowest cost service in the county of any type of paratransit or ride demand response service, or ride hailing, I should say. The van service is, as Halima had mentioned, it has continued to go down during the year. During the very last month of this year, it has gone down to about $150 per ride, but there's a number of reasons that that's occurred, but it's still a remarkable reduction from where the city started about 12 months earlier.
Thank you, Wayne.
The opportunity to speak.
Additional public comment, Terry-Ann?
Yes, we have an in-person public comment from Debbie Toth.
Good evening, Chair and members of the board. My name is Debbie Toth. I'm the President and CEO of Choice and Aging. I'm also a lifelong paratransit coordinating council survivor and now on the Accessible Advisory Committee. I was with board member Xavier back in the day when we were going through this process, and I was very grateful to hear your vice chair mention the recognition of what these two humans have done, because when we were struggling with those numbers that you mentioned, there was reluctance on the staff that we were working with to do anything about it. And these two humans came in with a huge mountain of work to do, and they have worked tirelessly, honestly, openly, and collaboratively, and are now going to be available for the folks in their service area who need additional rides. And they deserve a lot of gratitude and praise, and they deserve the 75%. I'm telling you this as a former PCC and current AAC member who has watched the entire process. And so thank you.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Any other public comment, either online or in the room?
We have no additional public comment.
Okay, I'm seeing no one else come forward, so I'm going to bring it back to the board and ask whether we have a motion for agenda item and the staff recommendation of the release of funding.
I'll move the item.
Is there a second?
Second.
So moved by Vice Chair Nowak, seconded by Commissioner Xavier. Can you take our roll call, please, Terry-Ann?
Commissioner Armstrong?
Yes.
Commissioner Arnrich?
Yes.
Commissioner Banales?
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess?
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly?
Yes.
Commissioner Meadows?
Yes.
Commissioner Obringer?
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier?
Aye.
Vice Chair Nowak?
Yes?
Chair G?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much, and thank you again, City of Richmond, for joining us tonight. All right, that brings us to agenda item 9C, which is approval of Senate Bill 63, Contra Costa County Small Transit Operations Funding Split. And our staff member here to present is Danielle Elkins.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair G. Before I get started, I want to introduce our transit operators that are in the room with us tonight as well. 1 second. Okay. So closest to me, I have Rashidi Barnes, the General Manager for Tri-Delta. Behind him, we have Bill Churchill, who's General Manager for County Connection. And then we have Rob Thompson, who is our General Manager for WestCat. So what we are going to be speaking about this evening is in relation to SB 63. I will be explaining a little bit about what is SB 63 and what is the purpose of SB 63. It's really to kind of answer the need for transit within the Bay Area. It outlines that we are in need of a world-class, reliable, affordable, efficient, and connected transportation network that meets the needs of the Bay Area residents, our businesses, and our visitors, while also helping to combat the climate crisis. Bay Area's transit network is a critical component of our overall transportation network, as you all know. It speaks to the importance of public transit as a regional and local benefit, serving both regional and local trips for residents of all income levels. This is about preserving, improving, and expanding public transit to ensure a world-class public transit network that will enhance access to opportunity, lower emissions for greenhouse gases, strengthen the region's economy, support increased housing production, and improve quality of life. To achieve that vision, the San Francisco Bay Area needs a public transit network that offers safe, clean, frequent, accessible, easy to navigate, and reliable service that gets transit riders where they want and need to go safely, affordably, quickly, and seamlessly. The San Francisco Bay Area also needs to prioritize increasing ridership to ensure the region's transit network is sustainable. Regional funding, increased coordination, financial efficiency, and safety, cleanliness, and reliability reforms are urgently needed to both preserve and improve public transit service. So from that, we are defined as the participating county transportation entity within SB 63. And with that comes two main responsibilities. We're going to discuss the first one on this item. I'm also just going to add our definition that the Contra Costa small bus operators, when I say small bus operators, that refers to County Connection, TriDelta, and WestCat. Our large operators are taken care of in other portions of the legislation. So what we're talking about this evening for this item is the 11.41% that is going to be dedicated to the small bus operators. And the legislation says that 11.41% of all revenues generated within the territory of the County of Contra Costa to the Commission, which is MTC, for allocation to the Contra Costa County small bus operators, a portion among each operator in amounts determined by the authority for transit operations expenses. So in terms of when we have this conversation tonight and we're talking about the split, the numbers that we'll be using is based on our fiscal year 2031 projections. So if you're looking at 11.41% of what we anticipate is $138 million for a half-cent sales tax in Contra Costa in the year 2031, the 11.4% would equal $15,745,800. That would be what would be split on the operator. So as we talk about the different options, that's the number that we're using. That doesn't mean that that's going to be the revenue in the first year. So what's also included in SB 63 are provisions. The only provisions that apply to the small bus operators are the maintenance of effort. This conditions that the operators will need to maintain their expected level of funding for operations, and they shall not supplant any sources of operating revenue under its control or fund sources allocated by the commission that were used for transit operations in the preceding 3 fiscal years. So the state controller will be looking at the 3 previous fiscal year expenditures and using that as their baseline for maintenance of effort. This does not include any additional kind of discretionary requests. Like, for example, we're later going to be talking about Measure J requests. That's a discretionary request. It's not part of normal baseline funding. Additionally, within the maintenance effort, they are subject to this chapter, and really just want to be clear that it reduces the amount of funding contributed towards this. This is about the, looking for no reductions in operating costs, reduction in operating revenue based on factors outside their control. So if something happens with state funding or anything that is beyond their control, they are not held to that in their baseline. So one of the items that has come up for question is discussion around guidelines. And what we had put into the original resolution was the option for the board to adopt guidelines around SB 63. And we want to be really clear about what is possible in terms of guidelines for the agency. In Chapter 3, it defines that the revenues have to be distributed based on the split formula that we come up with as an authority, and that after those amounts have been subdivided, the MTC will take the remaining revenues, and there is no discretion to withhold, reduce, delay, modify, specify the use of, or condition those revenues. So when we were talking about guidelines, it would be more administrative guidelines that would be focused on how do we link with MTC's administrative guidelines around how are we going to actually determine the split and do the math on the 3-year rolling average for the split that we are going to be talking about, the metrics we're going to be talking about? We're going to be using NTD data, which is federal transit data. That is on about a 2-year delay cycle. So we're looking at 3 previous available years. We're just looking to define that and make sure that's very clear and consistent that that's how we're going to be doing this data analytics for the split on the 3-year basis. It could also be in response to if there's any changes to NTD data policy, federal policy, state policy that might impact the split, and be able to address that. It could clarify administrative roles and responsibilities between what's MTC role in this, what's CCTA's role in this, and what is the responsibility of the 3 small bus operators. And it could also just be that we are going to be reporting out on and sharing information that's already going to be provided by MTC or the controller in their annual audits. So in numerous meetings with our transit operators, we were really trying to find a metric that worked to address kind of giving an incentive for increasing ridership and improving service and truly trying to meet the needs of what SBC, what we thought the spirit of SC 63 is. And what we were able to come up with is a split between passenger miles traveled and vehicle miles, vehicle revenue miles. So this is the split, and again, this is using fiscal year 2031 revenues to get to that 15,745,800 total. This would be the percentage split across our small bus operators. And then on the next slide, I can explain what those 2 metrics mean. So the metrics that we will be split between is passenger miles traveled, which is the cumulative sum of the distance ridden by each individual passenger. So if you have 10 passengers boarding a bus, they travel 2 miles each. That's 20 passenger miles. For vehicle revenue miles, it measures the total distance traveled by the transit vehicles while actively serving the passenger. So it's a balance of the overall time that they're spent operating the vehicle versus the amount of the distance and the time of the individual on the bus. So we did consider other potential methodologies and metrics. This would be the split if we were just to consider 100% vehicle revenue miles. This would be the split variation when we're looking at just 100% passenger miles traveled. We also looked at population. This is looking at the population that each of those transit operators serves in their service area. This is looking at if we were to use 100% ridership, and this is the metric that Alameda went with. This is based, again, on fiscal year 24 values. That's the most recent NTD data that we have. We also, just for comparison, this is what it would be if we were using the STA split. This is state transit assistance. So what we are looking for is approval of the small bus operator split for SB 63 based on the 2 performance measures as reported in the NTD database, which is 50% passenger miles traveled versus 50% vehicle revenue miles.
Thank you very much, Danielle, and I want to thank our transit operators for joining us tonight. So with that presentation, I will turn to my colleagues and start with Vice Chair Nowak.
I just wanted to confirm with the 3 operators that are here, that this is the proposal that you guys had discussed when we were working on SB 63 originally. This is the split that the 3 of you agreed to, right? Or
This was developed with them over a number of meetings.
So, forgive me, Bill Churchill, County Connection, Commissioner Nowak, to answer your question, no, this was not the original split when we were speaking with the authors. When we spoke with the authors of the bill, we were proposing sort of conceptual splits, but it wasn't until recently we had to get together and really kind of figure out and pound out what would actually preserve our various operations together. So it was sort of a recently fought split, but one that we have all come to agreement with. I'm kind of giving my public comment in a way, but I think it's important for this commission to know a lot of work went into it. and we did receive support from 2 CTA staff. They actually helped us out quite a bit and redirected us a little bit and sent us back to the table, sharpened our pencils. So I did want to express some deep appreciation for that process as well.
Good,
don't know if
because I
that
know there was a
helps.
lot of discussion, and there's been discussion since last year when we were, was it last year when we were working on this? So I just wanted to make sure that we had come to some decision that everybody was comfortable with in the end. I don't see any black eyes, so I think that's.
No black
They
eyes.
might have healed up,
Yeah,
Bill.
yeah, they might have healed up by now, but I just wanted to get that from the operators themselves. Thank you.
And to be clear, we began the process in May of last year. So it took over a year to arrive at this point.
Yep, thank
Bottom
you.
line, you agree with us? Recommendation.
I do.
That's, thank you. Awesome.
Commissioner Arnrich wanted to know. Thank you very much.
I'm very heartened that 2 CTA staff is recommending the hard-fought work that my colleagues and I put in.
Thank you very much, Bill. We appreciate that. All right, I'm going to turn to Commissioner Kelly and then go over here.
Thank you, Danielle, appreciate that. And I do agree that the bus operator split, I'm completely in agreement with that. However, I noticed at the Planning Commission meeting that there was a resolution that was put forth, resolution number 26.37.g, and the last two whereases of there said that there would be guidelines on this split. And it didn't explain what those guidelines were. And I have not seen those. And I don't see that CCTA should be imposing guidelines on the small bus operators for this 11.41%. Now, out of the 6B63 on the next item, on the return to source, the 19.20 cents, CCTA has control over that. But frankly, I do not think that guidelines should be imposed here. And earlier today, I spoke with the office of one of the authors of SB 63, and they are not in agreement that there should be guidelines. So I would like that resolution, if it is going to go forward, to have the last two whereases removed.
Well, if I could.
Well, I don't know, it's referenced in the item as part of the Planning Commission, so, and I know it was removed from today's agenda for 9C, but it is there on the Planning Commission, so I just want to make sure that that resolution has been removed, and if not, I would like to remove the last two whereases on that resolution.
Yeah, maybe I can just provide a little bit of clarity in terms of where these resolutions are at, but the way, we've been doing this for years, but just the way that we prepare the packets, so when you go into the authority board packet, right, on the attachments, you'll see there to go back to planning committee, so that's actually where the resolutions are at, so.
Right.
Right, and so based on that, the resolutions are part of the action. I just want to make sure that's really clear as to your point, Commissioner Kelly. And so the two items that are on there are that were mentioned at the planning committee, and I'm sure the operators will bring it up for their public comment, is that there's an item in there requiring the cooperative agreements, and we discussed that at staff as well as with MTC, and we're planning on striking the cooperative agreement. And so that was going to be part of our kind of revised staff recommendation for the resolution. And then just to bring more clarity on the guidelines, like I think what happens with guidelines is people immediately think like there's going to be like these restrictions and things put on folks. Like these guidelines, and I was talking with MTC staff actually today, are primarily just administrative to help make sure everyone has really a clear understanding of how the funds are going to be administered. So I'll give you a good example. Like for Measure J, for the Transportation Expenditure Plan, the way we administer those funds to the operators is that when the board, as you did today as part of the consent calendar, when the board approves the allocation, we release 50% of the funds immediately, right? And then we wait for the second quarterly payment of sales tax, and then we assess whether or not we're going to meet our projection, because all these numbers are based on projections. And then based on that, we will then release up to 90%, and then we will wait to release the final 10% until that last final quote. Now, I'm not saying to apply those same procedures to this. I want to make that clear. But I just want to make it really clear that for this particular one, these guidelines would be purely administrative. And when we were talking with MTC staff today, like they also will be preparing their own administrative guidelines in terms of implementation of SB 63. And so these guidelines, and I think Danielle mentioned this, is that they would be, number one, really just to make sure there's clarity on exactly how all of this will work, because there is still some uncertainty in terms of implementation of SB 63 in the future, in terms of how these administrative procedures are going to work. So as you think about that, and number one, the resolution just reserves the right for the authority board to do guidelines because there is still a lot of uncertainty. It does not propose that guidelines get approved today and that this gets approved today. Like, these guidelines would come back at a future authority board meeting for potential approval, and that's only if we really need them, right? And so we just want to make sure that the guidelines are making sure that the authority board, and I mentioned this at planning committee, that the authority board really just reserves the right to make sure that the administrative procedures are going to be produced, so that way we're all on the same page.
So what I would say is I would like to remove that language today for those guidelines, and then after we agree, hopefully we will agree on the split, that you come back and talk with the operators about the guidelines, explain what they are, because they were not clear, and I was not clear, and I think some people are not clear about that, and then bring that back at a future time. This just looked kind of sneaky to me, and I don't like it. So, and I don't think the small operators are happy about this either. So I would like to remove those last two whereases from the resolution.
Everybody wants to weigh in.
I'll turn to Commissioner Obringer. I'm going to come back to you, and then I have a comment.
Yes, so I just wanted to share, so as chair of the planning committee, I think, how much time did we spend discussing this very topic? So last Thursday, and we could not reach resolution. So we moved everything forward for discussion at this body. I think that the whole board will be able to hear, so we've heard Tim's explanation. When public comment opens, I think we will hear from the transit operators, and so I don't want to speak for them, but I just wanted to share with you how this moved forward. It was not necessarily that the planning committee was in support of guidelines. It was, we want to have the full board have the conversation because no one on the planning committee serves on the board of a transit authority. So just to give you some background there.
And I understand that, and I watched the entire planning committee meeting
Oh,
online.
you did. God bless you.
Yeah.
So if I could just ask one quick clarifying question, please.
Sure.
So I do understand the transit split was reached, a hard-fought agreement. I just want to understand, is this split in place for all 14 years of the measure? There's no room for for adjustments of population shifts or yeah.
So we did add in the whereas statements within the resolution that the first initial year would be calculated by the previous 3 years, and the following 3 would be updated based on NTD data, and that any future changes to the split would be subject to board authority approval. But this was partially the reason why we think administrative guidelines would be helpful, is that if there are any changes, significant changes in the data, to be able to give some flexibility or any way to respond, this would go back to the board no matter what.
Okay, so this, meaning the split, would go back to the board?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll be curious in public comment if the transit operators are aware of that. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I just wanted to point out, and Tim and Danielle, correct me if I'm saying anything wrong, but I think the reason we added this slide that you're showing right now about the guidelines was to indicate firmly that the actual legislative bill of SB 63 does not allow any change in the amount of money, right?
Well, and I can add to that. I mean, it's right there in the legislation. It says, after the amounts paid, the district shall transfer the remaining revenues with no discretion to withhold, reduce, delay, modify, specify the use of, or condition those revenues. We're not trying to put any conditions or requirements on the revenues. These are very strictly administrative procedures. And I think it's valuable because, quite frankly, there's like the Measure J allocation revenues to the operators today, in terms of that like 50, 90, 10, that's not written down anywhere. That's just matter of what we've been doing and how we've been doing it for the last decade, And so all we're saying is making sure that we write this thing down, because I may not be the executive director forever, you know, the board has turnover, and we just want to clarify and provide, and make sure that there's actually consistency and certainty in terms of how these funds will actually be allocated, and how we actually provide direction to MTC, and what time of year we need to do that, what's the schedule of that. Like, it's just, again, it's purely administrative.
Right, okay, I'll turn to Vice Chair Nowak and see if she had any additional comments.
So, you know, a couple things. Because the whereas had all allocations will be contingent on compliance, that doesn't work, right? So that wording definitely can't be in there, because the allocations are not contingent on compliance with guidelines. So that piece of it definitely has to come out. And I think to the extent that MTC is going to come up with guidelines on some of this, you're going to have to wait until MTC comes up with it. Because if we're not distributing it at 50, 40, 10 or whatever, you're not going to be able to distribute 50, 40, 10 because MTC is not. So I would suggest that you eliminate this, and then when MTC comes up with guidelines, you come back and we look at MTC guidelines and see how it impacts CCTA and go from there. So that would be my suggestion, what we do on guidelines. So, well, I don't know if you need a resolution for it.
Maybe we don't need a resolution.
I don't know if you need that in the resolution. We're going to come back and vote on that as a board. When MTC comes through with guidelines, it'll come here to get approved here as to, yeah. So that would be my suggestion. Eliminate that whereas and put it, and just have it come back to this board as direction to staff once MTC comes up with its guidelines. For sure, I'll let you know when we do.
Yeah, I guess, the wording is not really important to staff. I think the important thing here is that we just want to make sure it's noted here that we're not trying to be sneaky. We're actually trying to be transparent. We're actually trying to make sure that people understand that the conversation doesn't end here, that there's still a more conversation that needs to happen. And
But I think we can note that in the minutes of the meeting, that we're giving direction to staff to do that. I don't think it has to be in a resolution. I think we can have it in the minutes that we're agreeing to direct staff to, once the MTC guidelines are in place, that you come back here to propose guidelines for the administration of this, and then we can move forward from there. I don't know that we need to establish that in a whereas. I mean, I don't think we're going to even have that at MTC. So I'm not sure that we need to establish policy guidelines in a resolution.
I agree.
Something else you want to add, Tim, before I go to Commissioner Carlson?
No, I just want to make sure that we're just making sure that we're noting here that there's still work to be done. There is work to be done. Like, there's a lot of unknowns, uncertainties in terms of SBCC 3, and when it does pass, there's going to be a lot of implementation administrative procedures to prepare. And I think as long as everyone has an agreement that this is not a one and done, and that there's a lot more discussion that needs to happen in terms of actually how we administer these funds, you know, with MTC, because right now these funds go to MTC, they do not go to CCTA, but per the legislation, we play an important role, and I want to make sure that role gets properly documented in concert with what MTC is going to propose.
Maybe we're just going to add it to the motion that we're going to direct staff to do that rather than include it in here. Eliminate the whereas and include the resolution that we're going to direct staff to come back once guidelines are set by MTC to go through the guidelines that CCTA wants to set forth at that point in time. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah. Okay,
Well, can I just clarify?
No. Before I get there, I'm going to go to Commissioner Carlson first, and then Representative Ward.
Thank you. Yeah, and I don't want to jump the gun. I was part of the planning committee meeting. I don't want to jump the gun on public comment, but Tim just defined what the anticipated guidelines would be, and perhaps, I mean, I don't know where everybody will land, but a sense of security might come for staff and for the operators if you define them a little more clearly than just guidelines. If it's administrative or CCTA-specific administrative guidelines, who are we giving the guidelines to? Is it for our operational procedures, or is it for, you know, whatever we want reporting? I don't know what these guidelines would be, but if they're a little more articulated, then maybe it would be understood better and give everyone a sense of security.
Thank you. Representative Worth?
Yeah. So thank you very much. And I wanted to draw everyone's attention also to the letter that we received yesterday and Terry Ann's email from the operators that provided a clarity in terms of the reasons for their concerns about these last two whereases. So I think we're talking about the two. And I would concur that Director Nowak has made an appropriate suggestion. First of all, any administrative guidelines are subject to MTC because the law vests them with the authority of passing through these particular funds to the transit operators. And by indicating in a motion that it would be our intent that once those guidelines or those procedures are put in place by MTC, then it would come back to this authority so that there's a consistency with both organizations. So I think that, I think we're all kind of wanting to make sure that we're clear. What we don't want to have at this point in time is to have some uncertainty out there in terms of the public dialogue is, well, are these funds really going to go unconditionally to the transit operators? I think by deferring these two whereases to future time, that kind of makes the record really clear in terms of what our intent is, has been outlined in the staff report. I do. But I'm just wanting to clarify, Newell, that it's the two whereases, and but I think that's important. And I wanted to highlight the fact that the letter that we received really goes into the issues that the transit operators have raised.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn to see if I have any additional CCTA board member comment, and then yes, I am indeed going to go to public comment. Yes, Commissioner Berger.
This is kind of a newbie kind of observation, but I would imagine doing the work that CCTA does with all the different buckets of money that comes through, that we have a lot of different things that we have to, how we have to disperse funds, and there's all kinds of different guidelines that we have to meet. And so it would make sense that that's kind of across the board that we have that need to do those things. And so as this particular bucket of money would come through, it would be consistent with the way we disperse dollars anyway, no?
The money's coming directly from MTC to the small operators.
So it's not even going to come through us.
So under this reso, the Transportation Authority is responsible for developing the split.
I see.
That's the primary thing here.
So we're defining it.
That CCTA staff and working with the operators develop the split. It's kind of what this is about. And then the second piece, of course, is down the road, once MTC adopts the administrative regulations, then the suggestion would be then CCTA staff would come back to MTC and we would.
So if the split was to change in 3 years that we want, then we would have to, okay. All right. I think for folks that are listening, and
I think, Commissioner Burgess, I think you're raising some good questions, because I think around this is what happens after 3 years, right? And so no one has talked about that yet. We haven't talked about, so there's going to be a 3-year calculation of the previous year NTD reports, we're going to basically tell MTC how to distribute the funds. So then there's going to be 3 years that happen again, does the authority board want to see that split again? Does the authority board want to see the dollar amounts that are being distributed based on current fiscal year sales tax projections? Because right now you're basing them on FY31, and so FY31 is based on 15 million. When the initial thing might be 18 million, or not 18 million, sorry, $12 million. And so do you want to see the numbers that are being distributed to the operators based on the $12 million projection or a 14? So it's really just, again, making sure that there's clear transparency about what is happening with these splits on an annual 3-year average, right? And how those funds are being calculated and how they're being distributed, et cetera, through MTC, as a matter of fact, right? And so again, just making there's clear administrative procedures about what the role of the authority board is, what the role of MTC is, et cetera, et cetera.
Since the transit authorities have already come up with, an agreed split, I would love to hear their public comment on these things as well.
Yes, all right. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before I go to public comment, or is there any other board member? Yes, how about we go to Representative Foley?
Thank you, Chair Gee. If I could vote in support of the friendly amendment, I would. But I do feel that the two whereases are potentially muddying the water and a little bit ahead of the process. I think that based on what MTC directs to be done, that this agency will respond and be thoughtful about it and work with the small operators to make that happen. So I think there may be a time for this, but I don't know that it's ready for prime time at this point.
Okay, thank you. I'll go back to Vice Chair Noack to see if you have anything else you want to add. Otherwise, I'm going to public comment.
Newell second.
No, I think the process for the split is fairly laid out on the numbers that are going to come through. I think that can be easily remedied. I think the other administrative stuff, as I said, I think MTC will come up with guidelines. The money's coming directly from MTC to the operators based on this formula, reevaluated every 3 years, recalculated every 3 years. So I'm still in the same place I was a few minutes ago, so.
And I'm just can I just quickly beat this poor dead horse a little bit further? But no, I've got to express appreciation to the Planning Committee for spending so much time on this in your marathon meeting, and to staff for trying to figure out this resolution. I strongly, although like Mark, I don't get a vote on this, but I really think the recommendation that you have moving forward to remove those resolutions, we'll work through those administrative issues as we get the guidelines from MTC.
Right.
I think we're going to be fine, and I'd love to hear from the operator.
Okay, which is what we're going to do, because now I'm going to turn to public comment, and I'm sure we're going to have some. So Terry Ann.
So I know it's been mentioned a few times, but just to memorialize it, we did get a written public comment letter that was shared with the board, and it was from Tri-Delta Transit County Connection and West Cat. We do also have an in-person public comment from Bill Churchill with County Connection.
Again, Bill Churchill, General Manager, County Connection, and I want to thank the commission for the debate and willingness to consider this. I know I may have created some consternation with staff and this commission. That's not my intention, but I think going through this process, having this debate is truly important, and I just wanted to express my appreciation for your thoughts and your care in looking at it. The 3 transit operators in Contra Costa County do oppose those last 2 whereases. We do not think that they are necessary. It provides confusion for us. In particular, when you read the language, it's linked from guidelines with potential withholding of guidelines. And so when you see that linked in the English language, I think we just sort of naturally react viscerally to it and have some concerns. So our formal request would be to have those 2 whereases removed. Also, I do think that the process that we've come up with is quite simple. It is a 3-year rolling average based on what the performance is in NTD that can be seen and measured every single year. So I don't think there's anything very complicated about that. Additionally, when I look to our neighbors in Alameda County, they've not done anything like this either. There is, in fact, they don't even have a resolution tied to it. So, and then I guess my final thought is if there are guidelines created by MTC, I would imagine that would result in an MOU between the operators and MTC itself. In terms of the split, that is clear in the state legislation. That is 2CTA's responsibility. And so we would hopefully continue to work with 2CTA in coming up with that split. I think we did that in a very graceful way this time. So I feel strongly that we would be able to do that in future years if at such time this commission and staff felt that that split needed to be altered.
And Bill, you agree with Sue in her recommendation of a motion?
I am fine with the recommendation made
Thank
by
you.
Sue.
Newell is dying to get there.
I
Okay.
want to vote on this. We're talking about the past.
So-
Let's take the present.
Thank you
We've
very
heard-
much.
Thank you. for
Thank
that
you very
agreement.
much, Bill.
Yeah,
We
well
appreciate
done.
your comment. Is there any other public comment, Tarian?
Debbie Toth?
Good evening, Debbie Toth again. I find this conversation very interesting and the emotions in the room, and just want to share some observations. I think there's probably only 2 of you that have been attending this board meeting longer than I have. You, yes, and you. And in that time, we have not been in such a situation where there feels like there's so much fear. And that disappoints me, because I think we are in one of the most opportunistic moments I've ever seen with the Transportation Authority. We are making progress with technology, with autonomous vehicles, with saving our environment, with getting older adults and people with disabilities around better. Like, there is so much incredible stuff going on. Why are we feeling so much fear and a need to protect what we have instead of embracing innovation and trusting this authority? I am, in my 24 years, I have never dealt with so many incredibly intelligent, soulful, caring human beings at an agency. And I have never seen the transit providers step outside of their comfort zone and do so many incredible, innovative things that improve the lives of seniors and people with disabilities and commuters. So I'm just observing this moment of weird fear and pushback and not wanting to have guidelines that tell us how to move things forward because there's a place of fear. And I hope that you all can have real, meaningful dialogue and conversations and get to a place where we aren't acting out of fear and we're recognizing the incredible progress that can be made. And that's all I'm going to say on that.
Thank you very much, Debbie. All right, any additional public comment, Tarian?
Rob Thompson with WestCat.
Thank you. So good evening, Rob Thompson with WestCat. I'll be brief. I'll just echo everything that Bill said and supportive of the proposed changes to the resolution. I think the one comment I will say is that I do feel we could have gone about this process a little better if, I'll be honest, if staff would have had a conversation with the transit agencies before this came to the Planning Commission. I think that didn't occur, and so I think that resolution, we could have had this offline, and I think that's unfortunate. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. All right, any additional public comment?
Let me just check online really fast. No additional public comment.
Okay, then I'm going to thank everyone and close public comment, bring it back, and ask if we have a motion, and if we are going to have a motion, and let's make sure we make it very clear relative to the staff recommendation.
I guess I'll do that since I started this mess. I am moving to accept the staff recommendation on the funding allocation split. And then we are making an amendment to the resolution to remove the last 2 whereases and to direct staff to come back to this board with guidelines once MTC has developed guidelines as well.
Could I just suggest administrative guidelines?
Administrative guidelines, sorry.
second?
Yes, fine, administrative
Second.
guidelines.
Okay, before I move forward with that, I want to double check whether there is a motion for what the staff recommendation was. All right, seeing no,
So, excuse me, I just, legal counsel, sitting in for Imra Morrison, Allie Wolf, good evening. I did want to clarify, the motion that's currently on the table was to come back with administrative guidelines once MTC has come up with guidelines. In the case that they do not come up with guidelines. I just want to clarify that the direction would still be for staff to come back
come
with
back.
administrative guidelines for allocation of.
I'm sure MTC will, but there's no doubt we
Can't-
will.
can't hurt to clarify.
But that's fine as well, that staff will come back with specific guidelines. Administrative guidelines. Thank
Okay.
you again.
So I didn't see any competing desire to move the original recommendation. So I have a motion from Vice Chair Noack, a second from Commissioner Arnridge. So Terry Ann, can you
Could it-
take the roll call?
Just a comment?
Okay.
First, I just want to make a comment. Staff, best staff this agency had, probably one of the best staffs in the western United States, if not the United States. They look out every day for our taxpayers. No agency does the accounting systems that we do. MTC doesn't do it. They've been criticized for that. The fact is we count every penny nickel and hold people accountable, period. And I think that's an important statement. That's why we're sitting here. That's why the voters has given money, which we can then help other agencies, help different people in the room. Without that trust and without the staff that we have, our voters would not support anything that we're doing. And let's be clear, we're arguing over money that you don't have. You're arguing over money that isn't here, and this agency might not be here. So let's keep our eye on the ball. But when it comes to our staff, there is nobody better, and there's nobody that does a better accounting system. I wish we could all live up to this high standard.
All right, thank you. And with that endorsement, Terry Ann, can you take the roll call, please?
Commissioner Armstrong,
Yes.
Commissioner Arnridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Banales,
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess,
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson, we'll come back, Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Meadows,
Yes.
Commissioner Obringer,
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier,
Aye.
Vice Chair Noack,
Yes?
Chair G.
Yes.
We're going to call the vote unanimous with Commissioner Carlson absent.
Okay, thank you very much. That item, as Terry Ann mentioned, passes, so that is going to move us forward to our next agenda item, which is 9D, which is Senate Bill 63, Contra Costa County Return to Source Investment Plan. And so we have Danielle to continue on this item.
Okay, so on to our next item for SB 63. This is the Return to Source Investment Plan for SB 63. So likewise, with the split, we've had many conversations with our transit operators. Obviously, in October of '25, SB 63 was signed into law. In May, this spring, we started our first initial conversations around the return to source at our monthly general manager meeting. We continued based on feedback from the May meeting into our June general manager meeting, where we did some Mentimeters, talked about the splits, talked about the potential categories a little bit more in detail. And now we are here seeking board adoption. And then, of course, we still have to go to the voters in November. And when we talked about anything that would be guideline development or initial call for projects would not happen until after the vote and sometime in 2027. So we are discussing currently the section that refers to the 19.2% of all revenues that are generated in the county of Contra Costa to CCTA for public transit expenses and roadway repavement projects on roads served by fixed route transit. Like the last item, we are using the fiscal year 2031 projections based on the $138 million a year. 19.2% would come out to $26,496,000. We started from a place of looking at our feedback from the public, really to orient of what we thought would be the priorities in our category development for the investment plan. Based on feedback from the CTP as our starting place, we looked at the regional transit connections and how do we improve those regional transit connections. We talked about accessible and seamless transit. How do we use last mile connectivity to transit to improve and increase ridership, including things like mobility hubs, electric vehicle charging, pop-ups, commercial activities at spaces that could entice people to take transit more often. We also had the Show Up and Go transit network, which was about running buses and shuttles and also serving that last mile connectivity. And then also the Transit for All Neighborhoods vision, which is really to fill service gaps in underserved communities by adding small local routes and shuttles that will get people where they need to go. So in requesting feedback from the public, we asked them what are the most important ways to provide complete, reliable transit network. This is how they ranked these items. No, it's not surprising, the highest ones were around regional transit connections and accessible seamless transit, but overall, really high support across the board. Specifically, we also had asked around on-demand shuttle service and potentially microtransit and the interest, and the majority of people ranked in the interested to very interested side of the graph. So that's another reason why that was included. And then looking at our ITP survey results, so this is for our integrated transit plan. If you look at the bar graphs, the orange is for our sample population, the light blue is for non-riders, the medium blue is infrequent riders, and the dark blue is frequent riders. You can see a little bit of variation between our non-frequent riders and our frequent riders, but our top items are still faster, more reliable bus service, real-time updates on bus arrivals and locations at stops and transit centers, more frequent bus service, safer, better connected walking and biking paths near transit, expanded bus routes that serve areas not currently served by public transit. And then there was items around like a single app for planning, booking, tracking, real-time information around transit, items like wayfinding maps, and again, the low-cost on-demand shuttle and fare programs as well, which we also included. So we, in our conversations with the transit general managers, we did a few Mentimeters. We were looking at how would you prioritize the investment? So this is the feedback from the general managers. We also had participants from MTC join us, and Alameda also joined our conversations on some of this, because we're trying to get kind of consistency across the counties as well. And of course, the highest ranked was fast, reliable service, the second being frequent service, and then you had TSP, which is transit signal priority. So how do you, helping buses go faster by giving them signal priority through intersections. And then you have a lot about bus stop enhancements, safety, wayfinding to and from the stops, and then medium support for mobility hubs, scheduling digital tools, and then the last mile connectivity and affordable fares piece. Paving being last, which is not entirely a surprise. So as we started to think through what the potential categories could be, we were trying to really connect this with the language that we're hearing from the public. So the two categories we came up with were fast, reliable, and connected service, and safer, easier, and more convenient travel. The first one being really focused on the operation and capital improvements that would help the buses go faster, and the latter being really focused on the user experience of what can we invest in to make the experience of a daily rider better and encourage more to ride transit. Included in the fast and reliable connected service, you have the operational support for improving transit service reliability. Improving transit reliability on major corridors, it include both capital and signal operations investment. So looking at the transit priority corridors identified in our integrated transit plan, and focusing any kind of roadway improvements and kind of covering that paving piece on our transit priority corridors, or especially any roadways only that are covered by fixed route transit and frequent bus service. And then additionally, support for our transit signal priority system. And then really talking about that kind of last mile connectivity, we included making connections to transit on the capital operations side, so planning and implementation of mobility hubs across the county. And we've already identified 35 hubs in our ITP, but we are going to be doing our P3 and potentially doing more mobility hubs across the county, so supporting that network, as well as any base infrastructure like bike racks, facilities that would improve connections to transit and show those riding other multimodal modes to transit transit, that there is a consistent, reliable place for them to park their bikes at these stations so they can rely on it. And additionally, we included microtransit based on the interest in that as well to connect to the fixed route system. Especially given we've had such success with Try My Ride within Tri-Delta. So we'd like to see some more of that and support that. And then looking at the user experience side for safer, easier, and more convenient travel, we included wayfinding, real-time information, and trip planning and digital tools. So what kind of can we do to support the user experience and also connect better with the MTC's effort around wayfinding and trip planning. We included safety, cleanliness, and accessibility enhancements both on the buses, at transit facilities, bus stops, BART stations, and ferry terminals. So kind of addressing that user experience at all different types of locations around transit. We've had, as you guys know, a lot of interest around reduced fare programs and transit pass programs. So we wanted to include the support potentially for programs for students, older adults, people with disabilities, or low-income residents, and making sure that we're really connecting in with the goals of the regional network management and the Clipper program. And then we also wanted to include, because our connectivity to the system for older adults and people with disabilities is so important, making sure that we're potentially giving funding to accessibility improvements that are in line with our Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan, our ATSP implementation that Halima is working very hard on. And then the last item that has come up in a lot of conversations with our operators is what can we do on the data or technology modernization side to get kind of consistency and provide any support that they need that will help their operations and improve the transit rider experience with real-time data and reporting. So we kind of, reassessed with our transit general manager and said, what should the outcomes be of these local investment dollars? What are the overall goals and what we're trying to accomplish? And these are the bullet items that we heard from the general managers. And so we were trying to, the little symbols next to them are showing which of the two categories we felt that comment really fell into, and to show that we really were trying to be responsive to their feedback and the feedback from our public and stakeholders, and making sure that our investment plan really matches the needs of our users and of our transit system. So the next conversation we had was, between these two categories, how would we divide up the funding potentially? And this was a Mentimeter of the general managers. And the feedback was that we were looking at about a 61 to 39 split. So our recommendation ultimately was to be 60% for category 1 and 40% for category 2. And then, anything beyond this and the details, again, would have to be developed in future cooperation with the transit general managers. So our recommendation is the approval of our SB 63 Contra Costa Return to Source Investment Plan, and then the development of implementation guidelines prior to any allocations or call for projects.
Thank you, Danielle. And can I already ask, is that development of guidelines intended to be with the transit operators?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. All right, now I'm going to turn to the board members and ask if there are questions or comments. Vice Chair Nowak.
So first, I really, I need to thank Tim on how much money we're getting back on return to source, because it was Tim's coordination with all the other CTAs on the allocation of funds to the transit operators and so on, to make sure that we got the amount that we are getting back in the county for return to source. So I do want to thank him for that, make that statement. The only one question I have here is on frequency. I don't see in the section frequency, and I know that I get comments from people in Pleasant Hill that it goes every 30 minutes, and that's too long between buses, and if there was more frequency, they would go out there because if they miss a bus, they only have to wait 15 minutes. So I don't see that in here, and so what's your thoughts on that?
We had a lot of conversation about that, and I think that Sal, from the general manager from AC Transit, had some really interesting kind of commentary on that in particular, and that they've been doing a lot of surveying with their users, and especially on the younger demographic, they are saying that it's more important to know that the bus is going to come when it says it's going to come, so that they can plan around it. So feeling less a pressure of the frequency and more the wanting the reliability and knowing that once they're on the bus, that it goes fast where they're needing to go. So there's a little bit of a balance of there of making sure that we are staying consistent in the service that we're providing and then trying to help that existing service go faster and be more reliable to the residents. Just knowing also the limitation of funding that we have.
So that's from AC Transit. What about our operators?
I think our operators would like to see more in frequency.
Yeah, AC Transit is a very small piece of the county, and really the three operators that we have here, Tri-Delta, anyway, the three. I don't gotta keep repeating the names over and over again,
Well-
but this is what I hear from people is, I don't want to wait 30 minutes. I was talking to somebody I asked how long it took them to get from somewhere in Pleasant Hill to DVC, and they said 15 minutes, but if I miss the bus, it's an hour and a half. And I thought, oh my God. And so I hear those kind of comments, and so I just think that's something that we ought to at least include in here as an option. That would be my only comment.
Thank you. Commissioner Oberner.
Thank you. And so thank you it's good to see this presentation multiple times. It helps me to absorb it. So I see under the staff recommendation that you have before us, the development of implementation guidelines prior to allocation. So I just wanted to dig into that. So would that actually be coming back to a CCTA committee? So there's board input before those guidelines are finalized?
Yes, the whereas statement dictates that it will come back to the board for creation and adoption.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question that I had, since there are opportunities, there's, for example, one of the opportunities is paving on transit-served roads. So is there going to be, during the guideline development, is that where we would identify where city sponsors could become eligible to apply for those funds? Is that where it would happen in the process?
Yeah, the limitation of the law is that it is eligible for paving, but only when it is directly benefiting transit service, which is why we have included the language around it has to be for a transit priority corridor or where you have fixed route service.
Okay, and so, but can cities, where do cities come into that? Because we have the transit operators, obviously, and they're operating on city and county streets.
Yes,
So,
yeah,
so
that would be what we would have to create the guidelines for and a potential call for projects and then prioritization of transit priority corridors or fixed route paving.
okay, thank you.
Any other board members with questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Terry Ann, do we have public comment?
Yeah, we received written public comment. The first letter was from 6 agencies: Transform, Public Advocates, Seamless Bay Area, Urban Habitat, Trans Bay Coalition, and Genesis. And then we did get a second written public comment late today. It was actually sent during the prior meeting that we had, and that was from Judy Barrientos, ATU Local 1605, and she's also here in person to speak as well.
Just want you guys all to know it's almost my bedtime, so thank you for letting me get up here. I want you also to know that today, Tim and Lindy, we had a conversation for an hour today, and we plan to have more conversations. So I do appreciate the doors being open to hear from me. What I am here and concerned about is that this whole plan is SB 63, which I totally 100% support, is for transit. We're trying to make sure BART's saved, and all these days, though there's not as much, we're not on that fiscal cliff here in the area, but there are some strong, there's not enough money to run the funds that the transit we have. So I just am concerned, though there's this split thing that all of them are going to get, but will that really be enough? If it's not enough, then what are we going to do about that? And in this plan so far, it kind of says something about it, but it doesn't really say that if these agencies fall short, $5 million, You guys have to support that, and you got to take that from this fund to resource and give it to them. That's what they need. And if that's what is necessary, it needs to be said in here clearly when they do make the plan and SB 63 does pass, that that money will be there to support transit if it's necessary. Sorry, got notes. You know, when I look at those slides, I also see that the first 10 things on the ITP service results, the first 10 things are about serving the public. I'm not against hubs, but what I understand is the 680 corridor is playing for the hub or hubs, and why it's needed in this return to source funds, why it's needed here, I'm not sure. But I have concerns when I look up some of the things that are in these things. My concern is that they're going to put charging car things. SB 6 doesn't cover, SB 63 does not cover that. It covers charging for buses, but it doesn't cover those kinds of things. So I would double check what's in there. And I guess in the end, it's just making sure that the buses are number one, or transit is number one, paratransit's number one. That's what this funds are for. And I'm asking this board and the people that work for CTA to make sure that's a priority and that the buses are not cut short. And the other thing I need to say is that in 2009, we had 34% of service cut. We haven't gotten all that service back. It's been, I don't know, almost 18 years. You know, and that's the service people want back. You know, maybe it is microtransit, maybe it's other things, but let's get that back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judy. Do we have any additional public comment?
We do have an online public comment from Robert Allen, SFSU Public Health.
Hi, good evening, members of the board. This is actually Bob Allen from Urban Habitat, one of the signatories of the coalition letter you received from the members of the Voices for Public Transportation Coalition. Many of us who worked on Measure J and some of the county measures, as well as being the coalition helped develop SB 63, its predecessor legislation, and helped collect the 80,000+ volunteer signatures to get us B63 and Connect Bay Area on the ballot. Our big concern is that the category that lays out the fast, reliable, connected service is a little bit too broad. We want to make sure, as previous speakers have said, that the priority is to maintain and improve existing, fixed route service, paratransit service, and those types of improvements that we think not only meet the needs of those who depend on transit most, seniors, people with disabilities, students, essential workers, but that we can have a strong claim to take to the voters to build a campaign around. So I know that the legislation tilts towards making sure that any paving improvements go to transit, but even that bucket, we've seen this in other countywide transportation expenditure plans in the past where that language is there. And yeah, maybe a bus goes through an arterial or a road that can then be counted as eligible for those payment funds. But I think it's really, really important. We, both at the regional level and even at the county level, have never funded transit operations and transit service at the levels we need to get the mode shift, to deal with the climate crisis, to make transit a viable alternative. We can have all these goals. If we don't have fast, frequent, reliable service, we're not going to get people out of their cars. We know that. It doesn't matter if they're autonomous, doesn't matter what. So we just hope that we can clarify that category. We'd love to see the board take action to make sure the category is not overly broad, that it really focuses on the transit service improvements to frequency, reliability, accessibility that we think, again, will help us win at the ballot, but also deliver the outcomes that we're telling voters that we're going to get if we pass this measure. So again, please consider sharpening that category, and that we come out of this with a clear sense of what we're going to fund, and that as we deal with things like the fiscal cliff, we can tell voters and transit riders that this money is going to go to those priorities. This is really important with the changes in the greenhouse gas reduction fund and climate money cuts at the state level and the ongoing failure of the federal government to fund public transit. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Bob. Any additional public comment, Terry Ann?
We have no additional public comment.
Okay. Seeing no one else in the room coming forward, I'm going to close public comment. I'm going to bring it back to the board and ask if there's any additional comments or whether there's a motion.
I would just like to see frequency added in the return to source plan.
I'd support that.
I'd support that as well, and I think that's supportive of part of the public comment that we heard earlier from Judy as well, trying to restore some of that service that was never restored over the past 18 years.
Okay. Any additional, yes, Commissioner Arnold.
Yeah, I'd be concerned, first of all, I like the staff resolution. I'm a little concerned about frequency for this reason. There's other funding that's intended, but when you look at SB 63, it's to prevent service cuts. Prevent. That's bottom line. It's the only reason why it was created is because of that cliff. Now, fortunately, County Connection's in a little better shape than other agencies, but the fact is it prevents that. And it's to improve rider experience. But its principal purpose is to prevent cuts. It isn't to expand service, that isn't what it is. That would be a separate funding measure. I mean, that's sort of what a new measure J would be. Can we expand? Is there opportunity in whatever our programs are? So I would just say keep this simple, stay in our lane, stay within this. Don't use this for something else. And then you're going to get a voter who says, well, wait a minute. I thought this was to save the agencies because they have a physical cliff. And now we're saying, oh no, this is extra money to expand services and do things like that. That's really, you can argue that all the different ways, but I think that's not a good message to get voters to approve it. And two, it's not good for our voters in this area and their expectations that may or may not be able to be met because the funding wasn't structured for that. You can say, well, maybe I can do it. Is it $100 million of value to expand service? Oh, but I only got 25, so I can do 20. That's not what the measure is. Has no basis of that at all. So I would just suggest keep this simple. There will be an evolution. It's got a date specific. It has in there the fact is that the fiscal cliff, what are you going to do as your agency then to prevent this in the future? BART's already working on plans, as we've heard. How do we get through this period of time where we'll have this extra money to prevent service cuts? So I just suggest, great, we want to do this. We're trying to count money we don't have. The voters are giving it, if they give it, only for one purpose. I just suggest stay to that purpose. And if there's opportunities later to do something different, that'd be great.
Well, I would disagree with that's MTC's focus and having been involved in that for hundreds of hours. It was to prevent cuts, but it was also to improve the ridership experience. Those are two clear things. That's why there's money set aside at the MTC level for wayfinding, accessibility, and things like that. It is really two-pronged. Obviously, the initial thing was, this is an emergency, we need to get funding, but we also want riders to return. And that will help in the long run, not only just this sort of Band-Aid money to help the fiscal cliff, but if we can improve the rider experience, then we can get more riders back, and then that hole becomes less. So it really was a two-pronged purpose at SB 63. And so, from what we see in here, frequency is one of the top things that people are looking for. And so I don't think there's any big problem by adding frequency in here. Any return to source is meant to go, is in the very broad language in SB 63, was to transit, and then there was, the highway was added in primarily because Santa Clara gets so much return to source that they could not use it all for transit. And so we added highways for Santa Clara primarily. I mean, I'm just telling you behind the scenes, highways were initially not included at all, and they were added later on to be included due to the varying return to source. Santa Clara, because they have very small amount that they have to contribute to the 4 big agencies and have an enormous return to source. A lot of it will go to VTA, but they also wanted it for their roads where their transit agencies approved. So that's why that's in there. But, so I'm just, from your MTC chair, those are the purposes of SB 63 and, what we battled on. And so that's why I think frequency is important, because frequency, if it brings a lot more riders back, will help fill that hole. And not just our funding, but other, it'll help bring the recovery numbers back up. So that is my, I would recommend approving this, but I would like to add frequency into the, yeah.
And I
into the
assume
program.
you want to add it into the 60% side?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Obringer.
Thank you. So I chatted with my friend co-pilot, and they told me, that it's true, that the measure's main goal is to prevent deep cuts to existing services, as Newell just mentioned, but the local share could also be used to support expanded routes, increased frequencies, or new service areas. And so there's a variety of ways. So I just wanted to point out that we wouldn't be doing anything untoward by adding that.
Just as good as co-pilot, just want to say.
All right. Yes, Commissioner Armstrong.
Yeah, I'm all for more frequency. I think we're all for more frequency, but I just worry that it's if we don't do it smartly, we're liable to eat up a lot of that return to source money and not do a lot of the other things that are on this list. So I'm okay with a 60-40 split. I think these categories are fine to me. I think in the implementation is where we have to be careful, or we're not going to be able to do a lot of things that are listed here already.
Well, I don't think actually a lot of those things fall under the purpose of transit and highways that support transit is what all the return source money goes to. That's what's outlined in SB 63. So all these things listed under here have some ties to it, but that's what SB 63's return to source money is for. So I would sort of say our TEP money is probably more likely to fill some of those things and some of those things for 30 years than a 14-year emergency, let's get our transit operators back up and functional and efficient and frequent, fast and reliable manner, so. But
I'm not hearing you suggest take any of those off.
I'm not, but you don't have enough money to do all those things anyway.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're not gonna have enough money to do all those things on the list no matter what, right? So these are just options. So I'm just adding an additional option to it. I'm not taking anything off, but we're not gonna be able to do all of it anyway. With $29 million a year, there's no way we can do all those things, right? So that's all I'm doing. I'm just adding one more option in there.
Commissioner Keller.
I agree with Sue. Adding frequency on major routes, whether it's fixed route or even, some on demand, will bring people back, and then you'll have more riders, and hopefully that will help to solve the problem.
I was just going to say, I love the discussion, but as I said before, the frequency is expanding the system. And you can argue it all the different ways, and I get that. We're smart people. Bottom line is, there are organizations out there are looking for people like us to say this, because they're going to say that, wait a minute, you said this is a fiscal cliff saver. That's really all people know. And you can talk about I negotiated this or that. That's what the public knows. And if you ever work in a precinct, I did for for decades. When a person walks in, 90% of them don't know anything about it. All they're going to remember, oh, this is to save the agencies. Opposition on this, even though we've lowered it down to that 50%, there's still a lot of opposition out there. And those groups of people that are organizing to be against this are looking for an agency like us to say, this is actually to help expand capacity. And the minute you get that conversation, so I'm just saying, let's stay in our lane right now, leave this. I'd vote against this if we do this, and that's not going to be good, because it will come back, and we're going to be the agency. We're going to have a problem in our county. We haven't voted for things like this before. We're the ones that are lower vote. RM3, we didn't carry it. So why don't we just be cautious in this at this point, since, you know, we're making little technical reasons. Oh yeah, it really meant this or that. It wasn't for, it was to save the system. Stay in that lane and do that, and I think we will be better off. In the future, it's going to be around for 11 years, and it's a broad enough categories we can do a variety of things.
Okay, so I think that leaves us with, do we have a motion one way or the other?
I made my motion.
Okay, so was there?
I'll second it.
All right, so we have a motion from Vice Chair Nowak, seconded by Commissioner Burgess. Is there any other commentary before I ask for a vote? Representative Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I think it's important to keep in mind that our transit operators have had to cut frequency since during the COVID. So if I can give you an example of a route. There's a Route 6, used to have headways of one number, and they're now increased. So the frequency is not creating new frequency, it's really restoring frequency to, you know, to what we have had in the past. So not only are we addressing the fiscal cliff, which is a really important thing that the voters understand, we are trying to restore services that were cut at various points in time in the last, 5-6 years. And I don't have the statistic in front of me, but I think that's an important element that can be incorporated in this concept of frequency.
Can we amend the motion to include the language of restore frequency instead of increase frequency?
Just the frequency. I mean, these categories are so broad. I mean, you say microtransit. I mean, how broad is that? We don't have any microtransit. Microtransit doesn't qualify for anything that we're saving, so that's on the list, right? So how can we be worried about microtransit being on there that we're not saving at all and not put frequency on? I just have a hard time saying we want to leave everything as it is, yet we've got microtransit on that doesn't exist. So why tie the strings so much? So I'm sticking with my motion.
Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Xavier.
following up on what Representative Forth said, AC Transit got rid of their 72R, the rapid bus. It used to run every 10 or 12 minutes. They replaced it with 72L. You're lucky if it shows up in a half an hour. So, yes, frequency is very important because a lot of the routes have been reduced. I mean, they've been not reduced, but extended. Some of AC Transit routes, they're extending from every 30 minutes to every hour. So,
Okay, so we do have a motion to amend staff's recommendation. We have a second, so seeing no other commentary, Terry Ann, I'll ask you to take a vote.
Commissioner Armstrong?
Yes.
Commissioner Arnridge?
No.
Commissioner Banales?
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess?
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly?
Yes.
Commissioner Meadows?
Yes.
Commissioner Obringer?
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier?
Aye.
Vice Chair Noack?
Yes?
Chair G?
Yes.
Motion passes with Commissioner Arnridge voting no.
Okay, thank you. All right, that brings us to agenda item 9E. And I do want to reiterate that this is an informational item only. We are not taking any action on this. This is for a informational item on the Measure J reserve policy.
Like a 5-minute break.
That's probably a very good idea. We have had a very long day, so how about if we take a 5-minute break in case there is a need to run to the facilities or just even stand up and stretch. So we'll re-engage here in about 5 minutes. Ahead and get started with the reserve policy overview.
Recording in progress.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is an overview of our Measure J reserve policy. So as you all already know, Measure J was approved by Contra Costa voters in November of 2024. It extended our half-cent transportation sales tax for 25 years until March of 2034. It assigns funding for specific projects in the transportation expenditure plan totaling $2 billion. That was in 2004 dollars. And it was based on sub-regional equity, based on 2020 population estimates. When it was developed, there was no line item for project financing or contingency for any revenue reductions, and it did not set any priorities should such an event occur. As you've heard, many agencies have suffered from lasting impacts from the Great Recession of 2008. So when we look at our projected revenues that we initially assumed in the 2004 measure, in comparison to where we are at now, we have over $1 billion less in revenue overall than what we anticipated. We have $445 million less in revenue for capital projects and $605 million less in revenues for programs over that period. So this has been a significant impact to us as an agency and has led to various measures to make sure that we're controlling our expenses and planning appropriately for the remaining life of the measure. As we have come back to the board with strategic plan updates, as you can see in the years, we've had to adjust up or down depending on the scenarios that we have dealt with the economy. So showing, pretty dramatic swings, positive and negative, which means without having any kind of policy in place to be prepared for these scenarios, it's been very difficult to adjust and plan, particularly for capital projects. Since the last strategic plan update, we have revised our kind of optimistic and conservative projections for the remainder of the measure. And based on where we are now, there's a lot of still remaining uncertainty in the economy of what's going to happen between now and 2034. And we will have to keep monitoring this. So what does that mean for our capital projects? In the 2025 strategic plan, we have capped our expenditures across our capital projects. And you see some variation in here. In some cases, we were able to catch it earlier on or because the project was coming later, we were able to cap expenditures based on our new projections of revenue. In some cases, we've been successful in getting federal grants to cover the gaps. But really, this is limiting for us because since the majority of the money has already been spent, on this. So of the 291.7 million programmed in the 2025 strategic plan for capital projects, we've already spent 720.9 million, which is 91% of our expenditures as of July 1st, 2024. So that means that what we are left with to cover the remaining obligations on our bonds, on the rest of our capital projects, is very limited. And that has meant that we've had to tighten the caps to potentially protect us against future economic downturns. It is particularly difficult on the capital side because we've delivered 84 out of the 96 projects in our strategic plan already. So there's very little room for us to adjust these going forward. And we still have remaining projects. We have remaining phases for the 684. We have the 80 St. Pablo Dam Road project. We have 80 Central. We have Jacob Boulevard, Innovate 680, Norris Canyon Bridge, and the James Donlin Extension Replacement Project still. Additionally, within Measure J, we give significant, we give 57.5% of our expenditure plan to programs. Programs cover across, programs, anything from local streets and maintenance, the return to source to the cities, our TLC PBTF program, which we are doing a call for projects on right now, as well as our regular programs. So not only the transit programs, but our TDM programs, and our safe transportation for children programs, our school bus passes. All of that is potentially impacted based on future revenue. So if we are unable to essentially meet the obligations of our capital program, that would be impacting our programs, unfortunately, in future revenue, should sales tax come in below projections in the future. And just an understanding of how much of this money is going into the transit programs in particular. As of June 30th, 2024, $239 million has been spent across our programs that are specifically going to our transit operators. So Program 14, which is transit, Program 15, which is paratransit, Program 16, which is the express bus program, and then our additional enhancement sub-regional programs, 19, which is additional transit, and 20, which is additional for seniors and people with disabilities. All of these programs get significant dollars on the program side, so any potential downturns in the economy could impact these since we have these caps on our capital expenditure plan. And then also just want to note that within the transportation expenditure plan, there were guidelines that were requested to be created that were never created for these programs. And so our challenge is that we are limited in what we are able to do at this point into making any revisions. Just kind of like for level setting of the size of these things, in fiscal year 2025-26, we had 22.9 million in Measure J that was allocated across all the transit operators. So 1 year alone is almost $23 million. So if we see economic downturns, the ability to be able to cushion that and smooth out the revenues if they come in below projections is very difficult for us to handle. And just keep that number in mind as you're looking at the total balance of our Measure J reserve fund balance. And just the significant portion of the budgets that you'll see later that we are of the transit operators, we are currently 15% of County Connections budget with Measure J and 15% of WestCAT's budget in Measure J. So any potential impacts on the program side would impact them directly. So the purpose of the Measure J reserve was to address emergencies and unforeseen conditions. It was a tool to minimize impacts to Measure J programs during the recessions. It was there to address any unfunded liability after the expiration of Measure J, and it's funded by revenue windfall, if there are any, over the remaining years, and this was starting in fiscal year 2023. So the eligible uses of the Measure J reserve are priority projects and programs identified by the authority as eligible under Measure J, the expenditure plan, administrative salaries and benefits after the expiration of Measure J in 2034 for any remaining projects and programs, any remaining pension liabilities after Measure J expires, the cost to place a new measure on the ballot, which we'll talk about later, the priorities identified by the authority to address emergency or unforeseen conditions as long as the uses are eligible under the Measure J expenditure plan, and then any remaining funds in the reserve are to be reallocated back to the Measure J programs. So the mechanism that the board adopted to fund the Measure J reserve was to take revenue windfalls calculated, and that's the difference between the projected sales tax revenue and the actual revenue collected annually for our sales tax. So just before the policy, just to show how we did our program payouts, we did things differently prior to 2018. But really what we do now is we do a 45% payout at the beginning of the year. In the spring, we do an additional 45% payout, so we're at 90%. And then we withhold the last 10% until year end. If the actual actual sales tax revenues come in and they are below the 90% projection, the funds will stay withheld. If they come in between 90 and 100% of the projection, we pay them out as normal. And before the Measure J reserve policy, anything above the 100% projection was then paid out in the following year as a true-up kind of bonus on top of the annual allocation. So the change that Measure J reserve policy put into place is that when we look at that last 10%, we still treat the 90, if it's below 90%, they're withheld. If it's between 90 and 100, we still pay it out as normal. It's the surplus over the 100% of the projected sales tax revenue that then goes to building our reserve. So this is just a visual representation of what it looks like. So you see before that the surplus green would go paid out into the next year allocation versus after the policy was implemented, the orange then goes into the Measure J reserve. But if we meet 100% of our annual projection, anyone who is a program recipient is still getting 100%. It's just the surplus off the top that they are no longer receiving. So this is the current balance of our Measure J reserve fund. It's $18.3 million. This is the percentage that is matching our transportation expenditure plan. If you were to divide up our Measure J reserve balance across all of our projects and programs, this is how the balance of it would work out. So what we're talking about this evening is the transit portion, which is the 17.2%, which right now the balance is $3.2 million. In perspective of what we've already allocated our Measure J reserves for, the board took action earlier this year to execute our agreement to start to develop our future transportation expenditure plan for our renewal measure. We have created a balance that we need to come up with $8 million in order to deliver a future expenditure plan. So that's the cost of developing the transportation expenditure plan plus the ballot costs. And we're relying on the interest generated from this reserve balance in order to pay for that future expenditure plan. So of the $18.3 million in the reserve currently, we have earned $2.9 million in interest so far, and that was what was allocated for our initial contract to develop our transportation expenditure plan. Okay, any questions?
Thank you very much, Danielle. Are there questions? Commissioner Obringer.
Thank you. Just so one question. So it looks like the reserve, that 2.9 million is already allocated. So what happens if that is reallocated? How would the ballot measure and the preparation for the TEP, how would that be funded? What's the backup plan?
So the 2.9 million is already in contract and allocated to a consulting agreement. So the 2.9 is already essentially gone. What is at risk is the additional cost. So the 1.6 million anticipated interest earned for the next 3 fiscal years to pay for the remaining costs of developing an expenditure plan and putting it on the ballot ahead of fiscal year 28. So what's at risk is that if we give any money out from our reserve balance, it risks us not being able to create enough interest to then pay for the TEP.
Sure, so I do understand that. So, and I know there's another agenda item to discuss what's happening with the anticipated interest for the next 3 years. So should this body make a decision to allocate the 1.6 million times 3 in a different way, what would be the backup plan to fund the rest of the TEP?
So right now there's 18.3 million, and so I think what staff committed to the board back in January to fund the TEP was to use the earned interest to fund the TEP. Quite frankly, there is no backup plan. This is our only fund source that we have available to us to pay for the TEP. And so right now, it's the same way that we paid for the 2016 expenditure plan and also the 2020 expenditure plan. We ended up using Measure C reserves to pay for the 2020 expenditure plan. And in that time, we were looking under the couch pillows as well for that. And so I think in this case, you know, just in terms of impact, right now those 4 green line items up there, that equates about 7.7 million. So those are estimates, you know, and so if we were going to make, as we consider the next 2 items, if we were going to reduce the next items, the funds will be reduced from the 18.3, not the interest. So the interest is going to stay there in a separate account. So like if the board considers to allocate the funds, you know, in the next 2 requests, the 18.3 gets reduced by that amount. And then we run the risk of not generating enough earned interest. And if we don't generate enough earned interest, what that means is we would be then dipping into the principal to pay for the TEP. And then when you dip into the principal to pay for the TEP, that impacts everybody. So we would basically have to take those amounts and basically split it equally across all of the expenditure categories, you know. And so everyone then gets impacted if we have to dip into the principals, which, you know, it can happen. But it just means you're now impacting everybody relative to the reserve.
Additional questions or comments from the board? All right, I see none. Are there any public comments? Terry Ann?
We have not received any public comment.
Okay, so I will take it that this item, since it was informational only, is closed. And we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is, 9F, which is Central Contra Costa Transit Authority County Connections request for Measure J reserve funds. Thank you, Danielle. I should have said you're the staff member. You're
still
just not
me.
going anywhere, Danielle.
Still me. One more after this one, I promise. Okay, so now that you've heard about the purpose of our Measure J reserve, now I'm going to be presenting 2 requests that we have received for our Measure J reserve. So we received interest from our operators in making a request against our Measure J reserve. And so in April, we released to all of our operators a funding request process letter that outlined how they would make a request for our reserve funds. In May, County Connection, and you will hear about WestCat next, they sent a formal request pursuant our Measure J reserve policy to request their portion of the Measure J reserves. And June 10th was their deadline to answer any clarifying questions, additional items that needed to be answered to comply with the request process. And we went to Planning Committee on July 9th to have this discussion. So what is being requested by County Connection? They are requesting the full balances of the reserve for Program 14, which is bus service, Program 16, which is express bus, and Program 19A, which is the kind of additional supplemental bus service for Central County enhancements. These are the current balances of these programs in our reserve. Additionally, they requested the full balances for Programs 15 and 20B. Those are subject to approval by our Accessible Advisory Committee. So once the board votes, if they do vote to approve and release these funds, the next process for 15 and 20B would go to the AAC for claim review and approval. The one other kind of stipulation on County Connection is that parts of, Transpac has designated part of 19A to support the City of Martinez's management of the Pacheco Transit Center. So that would be additionally need to be resolved at the Transpac level. So I'm going to be giving an overview of the budget. So this is kind of to paint the full picture of the request that we received from County Connection. This is based on their fiscal year 27 budget. These are their operating revenues in the thousands. This includes, as you can see, Measure J at the $9,128,000. And you can also see in here STA, TDA, federal operating, paratransit funds, fares, passenger programs, and there, we'll show the entire budget. So this is just looking at their fiscal year 26, 27, and 28 forecast, including both operating and capital. They're looking at, for fiscal year 27, a $63 million budget. As you can see, as all the operators are impacted by the reduction in BART feeder service, so kind of the third line expenditure from the bottom, you see the zero out starting in fiscal year 27. A lot of the constraint that these operators are dealing with is the loss of those funds. In anticipation for SB 63, though, they are including the loan amount that MTC is providing to bridge the gap between when SB 63 would potentially kick in to cover the gap from the BART feeder service funds. So looking at their operating expenses, predominant portion of their expenses are wages and benefits. There's also purchase transportation for outsourcing, and as you can see, also materials, supplies, services, and other items that are the majority of their budget. So across fiscal year 26 and 27, so for 27, they're looking at a $63 million budget with $62.5 million in total expenditures. They currently have a TDA reserve balance. They're showing at $33.8 million, and then they have a discretionary reserve balance of $4.7 million. And this is just a projection from their budget, showing their plan for drawing down their TDA reserves with going to a negative balance at 2030. So just a comparison of kind of the impact and the request here, they're looking at a $63 million budget. Their balance on their TDA and discretionary reserves right now is $37 million. The transit available portion of the Measure J Reserve Fund is totaling $3.2 million, and their request out of that $3.2 million is $937,592, with additional coming out of Measure J Program 15 and 20, potentially. Actually, not 20, just 15 for County Connection. And so just looking again at the fund balance of what is available to them, this would be impacting that $3.2 million. Almost a third of that revenue would then be given to County Connection with this request. And just a reminder, we just talked about that how this will potentially impact our other expenses. If we reduce the $18.3 million by almost $1 million, it has the impact potentially on our interest to fund the TEP. But that is the only thing that is currently spoken of. The main kind of point in this is that the risk we have is if we don't have these funds to be able to smooth out future expenditure years, if the economy takes a turn, any unpredictability between now and the end of the measure, we will have pretty limited funds to be able to help the operators. There's an additional reserve that is for programs 14, 15, and 16 in Measure J, which we included in the staff report. The balance of that is less than $1 million as well. So the risk is that when we're giving over $22 million out a year, and the balance of our reserves collectively across the Measure J reserve as well as the special reserve in the TEP, we don't have very much money to work with in terms of smoothing if the economy does change. So that is the entirety. Our recommendation is that you guys discuss and consider this request for Measure J funds for programs 14, 15, 16, and 19A for County Connection.
Thank you very much, Danielle. I will ask if there are board comments or questions. Yes, Commissioner Berger.
Another newbie question. So with each of the different transit, can could County Connection come back and take more out? Or is there a split between the transit agencies that they get a certain amount?
Yeah, so of that 3.2 million, it's split between the operators based on their allocation percentage in the transportation expenditure plan. They will be taking their entire portion out, and if they request it, there will be nothing left for them to come back for.
Okay, and so then the other transit agencies, if there's some left, they would still be able to access it if they needed it?
Yeah, their portion is reserved for them, but that will, once it's
Right.
taken, it's
Right.
gone. But they can come back at any time.
Right, and then if I was the transit agency, I would want to maybe be able to access those funds and collect the interest for myself. Is that a possibility that someone could do that, or is there? I'm just, because
Yeah, I mean,
everybody is,
I mean, if they don't, I mean, if County Connection makes the request and you approve the request and the funds are transferred out of our bank account and put into their bank account and not used, then they would be collecting interest
Right.
for sure. So, you know, so I think, you know, yeah, yes, that's it. So that could
That
happen.
is a possibility, okay. I'm just thinking, and, we're saying if, I think a lot of us are saying when things get harder. So those are my newbie questions. Thank you.
Any other, yes, Commissioner Carlson?
I would just ask, if the 18.3 million were reduced by, essentially, I'm going to deal with both requests, but 1.1 million, what would then the anticipated interest going forward on the TEP be? I mean, that's what, a 5% reduction in the 18.3?
Yeah, so I mean, Brian and I have been kind of watching this and looking this. I mean, just with the current balance, the 18 million, we're barely making the 8 million, right? Just barely making it,
I know we're
right?
over
To cover, in terms of interest, to be able to cover the TEP, right? So if the principal balance is reduced, yeah, that would generally potentially go down. I mean, these are estimates now. I mean, they're all estimates, right? But potentially like 1.2 million, you know, potentially 1.3, you know, so somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay.
So.
Commissioner Arner?
If we go back to the reason we did this, it was for a long term. And because we have a variety of expenses, as we have to plan the agency that it ends in 2034. That's just prudent. That's our job. And if we can do a measure, that's great. But otherwise, it ends. So financially, unlike what happened in Measure C, we have to make sure that there are funds that we're fully funded in all the categories, all of our debt, all of our interest, all of those things are. That we have, because this agency as a JPA, well, not JPA, as a voter fund, none of us individually have a legal responsibility financially. This agency is standalone. So our ethical and moral compass says we have to make sure this is fully funded. We just got our projections, 2 months ago that show sales tax is dropping. So it's going to be less. If background inflation's estimated at 4.6 over the next, this sort of 12-month period that's coming up, there's only 0.5% possibly coming forward as growth. So it was to help smooth that over, cover our ultimate expenses before we close out the agency. And, you could take it out, that's great, but all of those things are gone. And to say one agency could do it is kind of unfair to everybody else, because the burden then lies on everybody else, what the purpose of those funds are. If you have $47 million of reserve or 43.5, I think I'd be waiting, along with all of the other entities that we help fund, till after SB 63 election and it's certified. Because doing this ahead of time, and you have that much money in the bank against the type of budget that's there for this particular request, I would say has nothing to do with reality relative to, oh, we have an immediate problem, we have to do this, and we need that specific money. It's more like, I want that money and I want to control it. But it's unfair to every other, remember, 60% of our funds go to other agencies. They go to programs and things like that. So right now, everybody has their little fair share in there to help this agency defease itself in 2034. And if it doesn't, great. We have like Measure C, only because Measure J got passed. If Measure J didn't pass, all that extra money that we had would have been to defease the agency. So, you know, prudent planning, let's wait and see what happens. There's no burning desire other than desire. There's not a mathematical reason that we should be releasing these funds at this time to anybody.
Commissioner Kelly.
Yes, I realize that the small bus operators are facing financial difficulties. They're going to have to reduce service. And, you know, unlike other programs, they have to keep the buses going. They can't just say, oh, we're not going to do, you know, TDM for a few weeks, something like that. But I do wonder if maybe they would be willing to wait until after the November election and bring this request back after the November election. If needed, yes. Or, I mean, they're entitled to the money, but the question will always be when.
Okay, Commissioner Obringer.
Thank you. And I believe we're probably during public comment going to hear from representatives from the small transit operators, but that's kind of my question is, you know, why is the request being made right now? You know, is there an unbalanced budget situation? Because I thought the budget is balanced. So I guess that's a big question for me, is why right now, as opposed to coming back after we see what happens in November. So I look forward to hearing more about that.
So
Vice
let
Chair
me,
Nolan.
let me explain balanced budget. Their TDA is what makes their budget balanced every time. So that's why you see those TDA reserves going down dramatically, is because they're having to use TDA reserves to make up gaps that the other funding doesn't meet. So while it's a balanced budget, it's always a balanced budget as long as they have TDA reserves. So I'm not sure that's the rationale. Now, to me, I'm betwixt and between, because waiting till November would help on SB 63. However, if the funds come out in November, we still have the same problem on carried interest for the TAP. So, you know, and then I'm also thinking, well, what happens if we have an economic downturn and other people come in for these reserves? And so I think there's got to be, you know, as you asked about a plan B, I think we have to look at that as well, because right now it's sort of like, and I understand the importance of doing a tap and a ballot measure, obviously for the county and all the transportation, but it's sort of taking priority over everything. And I don't know how we think about that, and I'm just raising it because I think that's how we have to think about this. So, you know, I really want to hear from the operators as to why they need it. I know not only, you know, are they facing obviously fiscal difficulties, but, you know, with the new Cap and Invest, the LC Top funds are going away. Amber, I don't know, tell me how much County Connection loses on LC Top. $1.5 million from the change in Cap and Invest, $1.5 million goes away. So, you know, and TDA makes that up, but then the TDA reserve goes down. So, and they've lost, you know, the bus feeder pattern. So it's a balancing act. We want to be able to fund a TAP, right? We really want to be able to get a new measure on, because the transit agencies want a new measure as well, because it's some very important funding for them. But now we've got this balancing act. There's never enough money, right? So I think, you know, I think it's important we hear from, you know, we've heard about why it's important for the TAP, and I think we need to hear from the operators why it's important for them.
And before I go to you guys, I want to hear Commissioner Carlson.
I can wait until after, I'll dovetail if that's all right.
Okay, all right. Then are there any other board member comments Otherwise, yes, I'll go to you, Bill.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to address the commission and at least give sort of our perspective and our explanation as to why we would even start the process now. So, and that it might be helpful if I try to set the stage a little bit for, you know, what's going on and how we got to where we are today. So, you know, looking back over multiple decades, and we look at this across like 30 years, we are predominantly a sales tax funded entity. 80% of our revenue comes from sales tax. And when you look at that sales tax across 3 decades, it grows at approximately 2.8%. Our expenses grow at roughly 3.2%. It's CPI, sometimes CPI plus, because we are subject to fuel costs. As you know, that can be profoundly volatile. And so that's why you see that difference. So what that means is we have a structural imbalance between our revenues and our expenses. And beginning in the Great Recession of 2008, dare I call it the Great Recession? I think it is. We had to cut 24% of our service. Those revenues were never restored. And what happens with this structural imbalance is we cut service every 5 to 6 years in order to balance the budget and remain fiscally responsible. It's important to recognize we are a people business. So when Danielle was showing that chart, and you see that, you know, the vast bulk of our budget is wages and benefits. It's operators driving buses, it's mechanics repairing buses. And so you have to maintain a basic level of some reserve in order to ensure that you can make payroll. So there's a different budgeting formula that goes on when you're a labor-based organization. So where are we today? We're providing 34% less service today to the communities we serve than we did in 2008. We, this year, starting this month, had a $6 million deficit. So we did pull $6 million out of our TDA reserve. That rate of buying down that TDA reserve is unsustainable. And so the County Connection Board of Directors recognized that, and in April of this year approved an alternative service framework, if you will, which reduces service again by another 22% in 1 year from today. So next July, we'll be cutting service another 22%. It's important to realize, and Sue just mentioned it, but 1 month after our board adopted that budget, CARB adopted a series of amendments that essentially defunded the transit component of Cap and Invest. The LC Top is one of those components in Cap and Invest. That's 1.5 million additional dollars coming out of our budget after we've already built this approved proposed 22% reduction. So what does that mean? That means we now have to either accelerate when we cut that service into this fiscal year, or I have to make that reduction even larger than it is today. So the other thing that I think is really important for the commission to understand is planning for and implementing a service reduction is a very complicated long-term process. It generally takes 9 to 12 months. 6 months of it is the public process. The first 3 months is the planning. So if I'm accelerating the service reduction from next June into sometime this fiscal year, I already am down to the 9-month point. So I need to know how much money I can scrape together, what's underneath the couch cushions, to really begin to then design what does that new service reduction look like. And thus the reason for me here asking for that money. I think it's important to know we recognize the challenges and we recognize what 2CTA staff is doing, and it's marvelously creative to pay for the TEP out of the interest, and so we wouldn't ask for these funds lightly. We do understand. The other component to that is we, as transit operators, also benefit from that TEP. And so it is in our best interest that 2CTA is able to conduct that TEP and is able to successfully run another measure. And we absolutely support that 100%. Listening to Danielle's presentation, which I thought was incredibly well done, the conversations amongst this commission, and Commissioner Obringer's thoughts. Could we wait? I think I can wait till November to see what happens with SB 63. It puts a time crunch on us, and it makes it more difficult for me to know what I am planning for in the next service reduction on top of what we're already doing. Our goal here is to be good partners, not to be a partner that creates problems amongst the agencies. And if that is what seems to make sense and carries the day, I can go there. But I think it is important to understand, from my perspective, there is a need. And it isn't just a desire to fill my reserve. It is a desire to be sure that I'm able to provide as much service to the communities we serve as I possibly can. And I do need to know how much money I'm going to have available to do that. The other aspect that makes things enormously challenging for the transit operators, TDA is not technically ours. I don't hold that. It's not in my bank. It's in MTC's bank. Making that more challenging, Rail has the first right of refusal over those funds. So I can't guarantee that those are my reserve funds to draw upon moving forward. And if I don't have those, then my reserve is profoundly smaller. So all County Connection is attempting to do is figure out and gain a handle on what dollar volume we can pull together to mitigate the service reductions that we know are coming. That does all change if the measure authorized under SB 63 passes. Then I agree, that does change the dynamics, it changes the formulas, it changes the dollars. So maybe it does make more sense to use that as our guideline, so to speak, and then re-ask in November. I hope that's helpful.
Very much so, Bill. Thank you. Are there other questions for Bill and Amber? Yes, Commissioner Carlson?
I'll just be the ray of optimism and sunshine that I was at Planning Committee. Because again.
That you're so well known for?
I know, or my sarcasm. But again, that, you know, what happens in November could change the whole playing field of where we are. If SB 63 doesn't pass, we might have to reevaluate even our TEP, right? As to where we're going to find funding sources, where we're going to put the money, all those different things. And I appreciate what you said, Bill, as far as your withdrawing or stepping back from the ask is an investment in the TEP and our success of getting Measure J renewed. And that benefits all of our transit operators as well as other programming. So that was my comment as we talked at the Planning Committee, was if we could hold, give us the opportunity, continue to make the investment in the TEP, and then see where SB 63 lands, because I truly, you know, we saw what happened with Measure B. Healthcare is falling apart around us, and the voters still didn't come to support that. So I'm not sure where we are in the political world, and that's why I'm not trying to be Chicken Little, but it really does at times feel like we're walking that tightrope. And so being a partner in that, I'm very grateful for. Sunshine Chicken.
Commissioner Obringer?
Thank you. I did have a question, so thank you for all that clarification. So is there I read something about an RM3 loan offered to small operators. So is that an option? Have you pursued that?
Yes, it is an option. So the RM3 loan is the offset to the bus feeder funding that BART has taken away from the 4 East Bay operators. For County Connection, it's a fairly de minimis amount of money. It's $760,000. And so it's not really in the scale of saving the service reductions that we're really trying to offset. And I don't know if you wanted to add nuance, Amber.
It was 860,000.
Oh,
Sorry, I can't help
Oh,
myself.
that makes everything better.
Oh, that's different.
This is why I brought our CFO.
And it's a one-year loan to bridge to just one more year of bus feeder. I mean, we've kind of been playing this one more year of bus feeder game, and then bus feeder is done, so we get 1 year loan in the same amount as the bus feeder, which has to be repaid if SB 63 passes. If it doesn't, it can be forgiven. So we did accept it, and we did plug it into our budget.
Okay, thank you. And so let's say, that this board did approve the reserve request. So do I understand that basically is helping you bridge until July when you already had planned service reduction?
No, actually, our thought is, given what happened with the Cap and Invest program, which is an additional 1.5 million unexpected reduction on top of the 22%. The 22% reduction came before that 1.5 million loss of funds. So our view is that would be used to bridge that gap so that we don't have to move up a service reduction or make it a larger service reduction.
But the service reduction is still going to happen.
It's going to happen, and it may happen sooner now.
Okay, so if the board does not approve the reserve request, it's going to happen sooner, but it is still going to happen.
It'll happen if the SB 63
Either
measure
does
is
not pass.
approved.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
And that's why when I'm listening to this commission, and I'm trying to be sensitive to the needs of CCTA as well. November is that day. November is the day that we really know and understand what our futures are going to be.
So that's the day of decision and judgment. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Meadows.
If we were to approve releasing the reserves, is it something that you could wait to receive until like May or June of 27?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Arnott?
No, if public hearing was over, I was going to make a motion. Sorry.
Okay. Vice Chair Noah?
No, I was going to make the motion as well, so sorry.
All right, is there anybody else that, Commissioner Armstrong, did you want to make the motion, or do you want to have a
No,
comment or question?
I just want to make a comment that I understand you've made a very compelling argument about the challenge and the need and the shortfall and all the service reductions. And the request is not huge, what we're seeing here in the big scheme of things. However, to me, there's sort of a principle of the whole thing. It's like all of our, I won't say all, but many jurisdictions are suffering the same kind of fiscal challenges that you're facing, and we're having to wrestle with how do we deal with it. But a reserve, to me, is kind of that rainy day, the sky is falling kind of thing. And I heard your explanation about who really controls the TDA reserve and all that, but you have a pretty significant TDA reserve right now and discretionary reserve. And I'm just not sure I'm hearing that we're at that fiscal cliff today that we want to jeopardize potentially the rest of the TEP or maybe the ballot measure and things like that we can't wait until November to maybe make this decision if that request is still needed. And I'll just say it like that. That's it.
Okay, any other comments, or does someone want to make a motion?
Well, don't we have to do public comment?
Oh, yes,
Wait.
I'm sorry. It's getting late.
Yeah, any
Is there
other?
any other public comment?
We've received no public comment.
Okay, and thank you, Bill. I'm assuming
Thank
we're
you.
there.
I
Okay.
appreciate
right.
all your considerations.
Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here. All right, so now I'll ask.
I'd make a simple motion, and I really appreciate Bill and his comments and offering us in consideration of hearing our point of view, is just to defer consideration of this item until after the certification of the November election.
Okay, is
Second.
there a second? Okay,
Could
All
I
right.
offer a friendly amendment to that?
certainly.
I know, Newell, I talk so much. Would it be possible that we give direction to staff as well to look for additional TEP funding alternatives to supplement?
Well, if you did that, then there's a bigger discussion. It's how do we defease this agency and have all the money we need set aside?
I would just ask.
That's way up there. You
I
have to have
understand.
both of those.
I would just ask that they explore other options to close the gap on the TEP funding need.
I would consider that as a friendly
Yeah,
amendment.
just-
If you added that we also look at how do we set aside the reserve monies that we need to defease the agency. That's why we have the reserves.
I think we're already doing
To what the agency?
To defease the agency in 2034.
Well, but we don't really have that right now anyway, do we?
We do. That's why we set the reserve up. The reserve was to help do that, assuming we had to. We didn't do it in Measure C, and we got away with it, that we have to wholly fund the defeasement. Because legally, there's no. So why don't we keep it simple? If I could just suggest, we had a great agreement. Bill gave it, let's not tie Bill up into that mess. How about we just go with the motion that Sue and I, if that's okay? And that's a good discussion.
If you're not willing to accept it, you're not.
And they could do it on their own, just by the fact that that sounds like a good idea as well.
Okay, hearing all that discussion, I'm going to say that we have a motion from Commissioner Arnrich, a second by Vice Chair Nowak, and we're going to end it there and ask for the vote. Tarian?
Commissioner Armstrong?
Yes.
Commissioner Arnrich?
Yes.
Commissioner Banales?
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess?
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly?
Yes.
Commissioner Meadows?
Yes.
Commissioner Oberger?
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier?
Hi.
Vice Chair Nowak?
Yes?
Chair G?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Bill. We appreciate you being here, and we appreciate your willingness to be in partnership with us. So, okay, in the interest of time, I don't want to shortchange Rob or item G, but could we perhaps maybe just truncate some of the intro part of it, given that we've seen that part, and go to kind of the key part of the budget and everything at the end?
Absolutely. All right, so I'm skipping ahead here. The main request is for the balance of programs 14, 16, 19, and then there were additional requests for 15 and 20B. The difference between Central and West is Program 20 in Central is a 2-year discretionary call for projects program versus 20B, which is a formula-based. So this one would include additionally 15 and 20B per the recommendation of the AAC. So these are the full balances, the 262 plus those other two programs. Looking at WestCat's fiscal year 27 operating revenues, similarly, they have TDA, they have 15% from Measure J, which is about $2.3 million. They have STA fair revenue. They are anticipating in their budget $1 million from SB 63, and in the RM3, I believe that is where their loan is. So similarly, looking at across their entire budget for their fiscal year 27 budget, which is mostly what we're focused on in the middle there, you can see the absence of the BART feeder service, and then you can also see the projected 63 revenue at the bottom, as well as in RM3 is where you'll find the loan for fiscal year 27. This is the fiscal year '27 operating expenses. The majority of the expenses going to outsource purchase transportation. So looking at their fiscal year '27 budget, they are showing a deficit. So they're showing a total revenue at $15.7 million and total expenditures at $17 million. And they're showing a current balance of TDA reserves at $6 million. And then just to show, this is from their fiscal year '27 budget, what they're showing for their ending balances for their TDA reserves. And then for comparison, they're looking at a $16 million a year budget with a $6 million TDA reserve balance. They're asking for the 262 of our 3.2 million available to the transit user program operators eligibility. And then that's that 3.2, which we've already talked about. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, since we've kind of seen it, Vice Chair Nowak?
Can I ask Rob to just come up and make a statement whether his similar situation to Bill or whether his situation is different at all?
Sure. So I think our situation, it's similar, but it is slightly different. So I think there's two things I want to kind of mention. The numbers that Danielle showed were our projected, our draft budget. So we haven't actually finalized our budget because we are still showing that deficit. So that when we balance our budget, our TDA reserve balance will actually be more like $3.4 million currently. Sorry, well, our reserve balance will be more like $3.4 million. And historically, Westcat's reserve balance is being used as local match for vehicle purchases. We've not traditionally used our reserves to balance the budget. So we have a projected need for our local match of around $8 million in upcoming years for purchases of replacement vehicles. So that's the decision that my board's kind of having to make right now, is using reserves to keep service on the street or to keep reserves on hand for future bus purchases. But I think the real where we are right now is our projected service that is going to go on the street, probably in late August, early September, is showing a slight service reduction. And I think that is based on the fact that our board are not willing to use all of our reserves to keep that service on the street. So I think this request would help us keep service on the street going up into SB 63 and into the election in November. So I think while I agree we could probably wait and defer till November, we are looking at reducing some service sort of in the next 2 months if these funds aren't made available.
2 months or two?
In the next 2, so our service, we haven't finalized the date yet, but our service is probably going on the street in late August, early September.
Thank you, Rob. Other questions, comments for Rob? Do we have any other,
So my question is, you would prefer the funds now versus November. You're in a little tighter position than Bill is. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, but as the whole discussion's gone, if the board decides to hold with November, we're okay with that. We would like the funds, but I'm okay with waiting until November.
Okay. Thank you.
thank you, Rob. Okay, do we have any other public comment, Tarian?
We have no public comment.
Okay, so do I have Commissioner Kelly?
It is a relatively small amount of money, so, I mean, I would be open to giving it to them.
I would just suggest the same thing. He very politely said they could wait. $252,000 isn't going to save the service. If you look at the percentage of their budget, what this represents, I would think that we would behoove, in all fairness, to Bill, the other transit operators, and anybody else makes it, wait till after the election, take him up on that. Would $252,000 stop you from, I mean, I'm looking at your budget.
It's about 2% of our service we would cut. 2%, it's only 2%, but it's 2% of, we run around 88,000 service hours annually, so this would reduce it by around 2,000 hours.
Yeah, I'm just saying, let's apply the same, as an agency, it's always called the consistency rule as government agencies. We need to be consistent in how we do things. Otherwise, you're going to get knocked off in a variety of directions. I would say let's be consistent and wait. And it shows that we are supportive of that SB 63 passing.
Okay, and Rob, you think you can wait? Okay, I'll agree to that.
I'd make a motion then that we defer this as well as with County Connection until after the certification of the election in November.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Arnrich, a second by Commissioner Kelly. Will you take the vote for us, Terry Ann?
Commissioner Armstrong?
Yes.
Commissioner Arnrich?
Yes.
Commissioner Banales?
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess?
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly?
Yes.
Commissioner Meadows?
Yes.
Commissioner Obringer?
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier?
Aye.
Vice Chair Nowak?
Yes.
Chair G?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for hanging in there with us all evening. We appreciate all of it. Okay, that brings us to wrapping up our agenda. Everybody has seen the correspondence, the reports. It's all there for you. I do not have any comments tonight, which I'm sure you're grateful for. Do we have any other commissioners with comments? Or I'll ask our representatives if, would Sue like to explain more about MTC to us tonight, or?
The mothership is fine right now.
Okay. We lost our BART representative, so Amy, you have nothing to add? Okay. So Tim, it's yours to finish up.
Yeah, I'll just make this really quick. I don't know if he's actually still here. Is he still here? Matt? There he is in the corner. So I just want to recognize Matt really quickly. We are celebrating Matt's 20th anniversary for CCTA. So I just want to give him a big round of applause. So we're really proud of him, particularly the work that he's been doing at CCTA, but also, you know, the growth that he's done in the organization. You know, he started here, associate planner, senior planner, principal planner, and now our director of planning. So just really congratulations, Matt. It's fantastic to work with you. In the executive director report, there's a quick update on TEP listening in case you're wondering what's happening there. And I know we talked about it during the workshop. SB 1408 continues. I'm not going to go through all the details, but it's in the executive director report. It's been double referred. Local government heard it, and so now it's off to Assembly Rev Tax. And so just if you want a quick update there, Rev and Tax voted 4-2, local government voted 8-1. And then, as you all know, we had RMS, so appreciate everyone's support, RMS, as well as the delegation from Holland. We also hosted the NHTSA administrator at Gomentum Station, which was really exciting, which is a really big deal for a lot of reasons, but I don't have time to share. And then I also want to mention that the California DMV regulations, really in partnership with some of the transit operators, we were successful to get an important carve out in commercial heavy duty AV regulations. And so the California Transportation Commission invited me to come to their meeting to brief them on the regulations as well, what is possible or what could be real with those regulations in the future. So that was really nice, and I think it made a good plug for CCTA and to host CTC here in Contra Costa County in the future, which is also a huge deal given a lot of the funding decisions they make. And then just generally, I just want to put a shout out for just the youth program. So Youth Ride Free has been going on, ridership continues. We just put out our applications for Pass the Class on July 7th. So we are starting to kind of make that transition from Youth Ride Free to Pass the Class. But we will need your help, actually. So I think Lindy we can send this out later, but we are doing a complete youth survey right now to get more information about youth transportation. This is both for Youth Ride Free as well as Pass the Class and other important feedback and insights we need for the TEP. And so it'd be really helpful to get these on your distribution list and get this into the ether through your distribution list. It's really important. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Yeah. Congratulations, Matt. We're very grateful that you're with us and celebrating your anniversary. And here I have to be a little gentle, Aaron, given the time of night, but I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 10:19, and our next regular meeting is September 16th. Thank you.